Bore da, good morning and welcome to this Digital Health and Care Wales Programmes Delivery Committee. I would formally like to welcome Megan Morris, who's joined us recently, and this is her first Programmes Delivery Committee. In relation to today's meeting, I'd like to make a few notes before we start. Firstly, committee members won't always be looking directly at the camera. We have committee papers usually on a separate device, and we'll be constantly looking those through the meeting. We're planning to take a 10-minute break after section 4 of the agenda and aiming to conclude the meeting around 12:40. I don't plan to do introductions up front, so I would ask committee members if they would introduce themselves when they first ask a question or are presenting. And with that said, I'll now proceed with the agenda. First agenda item is apologies for absence. I haven't received any in advance, and I don't think we've got anybody missing because we'd look to have full attendance. Declarations of interest is next. Haven't received any in advance of the meeting, so could I just pause for a second? Is there anything on today's agenda that anybody wishes to bring my attention to? No, great. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Because of the timing, we have quite a few items on the consent agenda. I've not received any queries or questions in advance of the meeting, but what I will do is just step through each item and make sure we're formally happy to either approve or not, depending on the item. So first item is 2.1, which is the minutes of the last meeting. That's both the public and the private meetings. We're being asked to approve those, so can I just check to see if anybody's got any issues they want to draw to our attention? Okay, I'll take it that we're happy to approve. Next item, 2.2, is the forward work plan. That's just for noting. Item 2.3 is the Programmes Delivery Committee annual report. We're being asked to endorse the annual report and subsequently for approval to the SHA board. Can I just check we're all happy to do that? Yep, great. Okay. Next item, 2.4, is Programme Delivery Committee Effectiveness Self-Assessment. This is for noting. 2.5, Programme Delivery Cycle of Business. This is for approval. So can I ask if everybody's happy to approve? Yes, great. And the last item is the internal audit on programme management. Again, this is for noting. So unless anybody's got any questions, that's duly noted. Oh, Evan, you wanted to say something?
I'm just feeling uncomfortable that nobody said anything on the consent agenda, but to note, David, that the internal audit report has already been to the Audit and Assurance Committee, chaired by Marion. Internal audit colleagues were there. I'll just note here again to thank them and the programme teams that were involved in this. They turned that work around very, very quickly for us over the Christmas period. So I'm very pleased it was coming here, because otherwise we would have been waiting another 3 months. So just thanks to everybody.
Good. All right. Thank you for that, Evan. Okay. So let's move on to the main agenda. Item 3.1 is the action log, and I'm pleased to report there's no outstanding actions. So we'll move on to the main body of the meeting now, which is section 4. These are our assurance, and for this I'm going to hand over to Evan to introduce this section, and he will get support from executive team colleagues. Over to you, Evan.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Chair. I should have introduced myself. Evan Evans, the Director of Digital Strategy, responsible for programmes and planning and strategy and a few other things. This section of the Programmes Delivery Committee is a regular part where we look to take an annual update from each of the major programmes on a rolling cycle through the year. So that's set out in the forward work plan for anybody who wants to see what's coming up in the next exciting episode of PDC. What we have in front of us today is updates on the cloud transition programme and the WPAS Welsh Patient Administration System disaggregation programme, which has moved into closure. So both of those will be presented by Sam Lloyd, Director of Operations. Then we take an update on the GP systems framework. This is the migration of GP systems to a single supplier across Wales. Sam Hall will give that update. And then finally, we've added a short one, which is not actually an annual update, but we put it into this section as we were discussing when we were preparing for this meeting with yourself, Chair, which is just a brief update on the changes we're making to the governance around the NHS Wales app as we move out of the programme arrangements into a product continuing arrangement. And again, Sam will be updating on that because she'll be taking full responsibility for the app from the start of the new year in April. So she and I are both handling this at the moment, but when we're talking about the future for the app, that's Sam's lead. So that's what we've got ahead of us for the next hour and a bit, I think.
Okay.
Unless you want to add anything else, I'll hand over directly to Sam Lloyd.
Happy for Sam to take the lead.
Thank you very much, Ivan. I'm Sam Lloyd. I'm Director of Operations. So I'm going to give an overview first of the cloud transition program, which is now well underway. So the purpose of this program is to migrate our applications and services to modern, secure cloud platforms with the aim of making services faster, more secure, and easier to manage. The program really will attempt to align, it's a key part of our alignment to our product-centric operating model, and it makes the product delivery much more efficient through automation and self-service. It strengthens security and reliability, maximizing uptime and ensuring that our services remain resilient and accessible. There's a big part of organizational change to this as well. So a major strand of the program is training our people so that everyone has the skills to work in the cloud first environment. And hopefully it will ensure more predictable costs, which are consumption based rather than large capital upfront investment. The program is structured into 3 areas. So there's the infrastructure delivery aspect, which is building the cloud infrastructure, so landing zones, platforms, automation capabilities, and so on. Then there's the work to actually migrate and optimize. So we have to take the services that are currently running in our data centers, migrate them into cloud, and in the process of doing so, where it's appropriate, optimize them so that they run efficiently in cloud and we make best use of those capabilities. And then, as I've said, there's an organizational change element to this as well. So we need to support staff in new ways of working and ensure that there's a benefits realization framework, which is put across the top of the program so that we can track the financial and non-financial benefits over the life of it. This is large and complicated, and we're partnering with a range of suppliers, which we'll come to help make sure that we deliver this effectively and securely, and that we're able to transition the management of the facility across safely to our internal resources, because, as I said, that's really important. And a key aspect of this as well is that we share these learnings with the wider system. So, we want to help the rest of NHS Wales on its cloud journey as well. So we'll be making sure that we share our learnings as we go, share information from the program as it progresses, set up relevant communities of practice, and so on. The scope of the program then, so we're migrating 100 services which are hosted on 1,600 on-premise servers. So that's quite a significant logistical undertaking in and of itself. We need to implement governance, security, and operational frameworks to ensure that we've got compliance and continuity of service during this process. Obviously, we need to migrate in a phased and structured manner to make sure that we're maximizing system uptime, we're not causing disruption. We've got clear program milestones and progress that we can track against. We're looking to migrate, optimize, and re-platform where practical. So that means that, as I said, we need to make sure that as we make these transitions, that services are being re-engineered as much as is practical to make best use of cloud capabilities. There's a bit of a sweet spot that we need to find through this process. The more optimization that we're able to do now, the more efficiently and effectively we're going to be running in cloud in the future. But obviously, the more cost and time it takes up front in order to get to that point. So there's a balance to be struck, really. The right amount of optimization is where we're aiming to go for. And that's more of an art than a science, I think. And we'll be working that through as we refine the governance framework for the program. And as we move into the first waves of migration, the idea will be to do a pilot set of migrations, which we'll then use to fine tune that process and learn from each subsequent iteration. Engagement with stakeholders is key. So that's internally and externally. Our product teams are really customers of our cloud infrastructure, so they need to be working with us closely throughout this process and ensuring that their capabilities are fed into the new ways of working that we're building, but also our external stakeholders need to be assured of ongoing resilience and security, and obviously that we need to be sharing those learnings. And then lastly, from a scope perspective, it's process improvement, training, business change. So there's a big operating model adoption piece to this, and that's running as a separate phase of the program. We're really looking to deliver a range of benefits through this work. So cost reduction cost avoidance is probably the more accurate term for this. So, whatever we do, it's going to cost more to run our infrastructure than it does now, because costs are continuing to go up. We've talked before about the digital inflationary pressures that we're facing. So there isn't a scenario where our costs go down, but what we're looking to do is to avoid costs where possible. And we've obviously, through the development of the business case and the work that's gone into that, and assessing our on-premise workload in this state, we've ascertained that actually we should be able to avoid about £19 million worth of cost over the 10 years of the program throughout this, through the migration to cloud. So that's a significant benefit, but obviously that's going to require careful management over the duration of the program in order to realize that. We should be seeking service reliability and availability improvements. We have seen, actually looking at our major incident frequency, they have decreased this year when compared to the previous year, but it's still higher than we would want to see it, and we would expect to see that decrease continuing as we move into cloud, because by their nature, the hyperscalers are able to invest significantly more in infrastructure than we can, looking at reliability or resilience mechanisms which are national. So there's a whole host of capabilities that we can plug into as we move into cloud, which should see an increase in the reliability of our services. Cybersecurity, similar story. Hyperscalers can invest significantly in security capabilities, which we'll be able to tap into. It's not a golden ticket, though. There's a lot of configuration that is required to make sure that we retain appropriate levels of cybersecurity and improve them. So some of that is on us, and there's a significant security work stream to the program which is underway now. Process automation is another major objective that we're looking to achieve here. So one of the key measures of success will be reduction of time to market for new features and functionality and new systems. So we should be reducing the time between us being requested to deliver something in order to deliver particular clinical outcomes out there in the service, and those outcomes being actually delivered. That time needs to be reduced, and that's going to be one of the measures that will be made, that we'll be looking to track. Sustainability is another one. Again, because of the scale of cloud infrastructure, it's much more cost effective to run and much more environmentally efficient to run in cloud, because of the bulk purchasing power that the hyperscalers have. Energy costs are lower, workloads run more efficiently, and so on. So those are just some of the benefits that we're looking to achieve. We've set those out in the business case. We've brought in an external supplier who's going to be working with us to define that benefits framework that we'll be then using to track and measure over the life cycle of the program. There's a number of benefits that we've already delivered. So we've negotiated a new contract with Microsoft for our Azure cloud spend, which has moved up our discounts from 15% to 24%. We've already made cloud infrastructure designs available for all NHS bodies to use. We've bought a new cloud-first backup system, or in the process of doing so, which we approved at the board recently. We've upgraded and installed new firewalls based on an improved and more cost-effective design. So there's a number of benefits that we're bringing forward to the early phases of the program as much as we can. We've done some persona mapping to help us understand where these benefits land for particular groups of people. So, for clinicians, for example, they should be experiencing less disruption and downtime due to more reliable services. Infrastructure engineers should be having self-service access to pre-secured, ready-to-use platforms. Software developers should be able to accelerate their development through deploying using cloud-native open source technologies, etc. So we're looking at this from the range of personas that we're working to serve ultimately. The program is divided into 3 overarching work streams. So we have the infrastructure delivery stage, which is effectively setting up the environments that we need in order for the cloud to work safely and reliably. That's everything from internet connections, cyber security measures, backup systems, landing zones, etc. And we're in the process of installing a new high bandwidth circuit, which gives us direct access into cloud rather than going through, it's a direct line, which means that it increases resilience and gives us more flexibility of network configuration and so on. Then we've got the migration and optimization work stream, which is the planning and carrying out the moves to cloud. That's checking what we need to move, so what's eligible to move and what isn't. Looking at the order in which we need to move things, making sure that we are ensuring resilience of clinical critical services during the migration phases, testing, and then undertaking the migration waves in a sensible order and making sure that we learn from those as the process unfolds. And then finally, the organizational change work stream. This is a major shift for our people, and we've been through quite a lot of organizational change already, so making sure that we take people on the journey with us, we help people understand how to orientate themselves in the new world, supporting staff to adapt and feel confident with the change. These are really important aspects of the program and are vital really to its success. And wrapped into the organizational change work stream is also the benefits realization and tracking work stream. So those two are being delivered by the same partner. So progress against those work streams. So we've delivered the high-level design for the cloud infrastructure. We're underway now with the low-level design. There's a number of workshops and so on which are underway now with teams across our organisation. We've got a clear design strategy, and we're now working through technical requirements which we need to move systems to the cloud safely and efficiently. The migration and optimization work stream, we are tendering at the moment for the partner to come in to do that work. That commercial process is underway at the moment, so I'll be able to talk more about that in due course. And the organizational change activity, that contract has been awarded, the partner has landed. There's a number of deliverables which have already been completed, including the operating model and the revision of our cloud strategy. So that work is well underway, and the benefits framework is in the process of being developed now. A range of suppliers that we are working with. So in the infrastructure delivery space, we're working with TPX Impact on the landing zones and the technical infrastructure. And we're working with KPMG currently on the cybersecurity design and assurance. In the migration and optimization space, as I say, there's a supplier that there's a tender currently underway for that, but we're already working with Google and Microsoft, who we clearly have relationships with as the main hyperscaler providers at the moment, and Trustmark, who are working with us on testing strategy and assurance. And then the organizational change partner, that's a joint venture between Capacitas and Channel 3. So it's quite a complex supplier landscape that we're operating across, but we do need the expertise of a range of different organizations. Some of the challenges that we face, I think I've touched on them really already, but technical complexity, closing the skills gap, engaging with stakeholders, making sure that everyone is sighted on what we're doing and have the opportunity to feed into that as appropriate. Dependency on suppliers, procurement timelines. These are quite high value procurements, and so there's a lot of the timelines are quite extended in terms of seeking approval at the various governance gateways and so on. And then the cost and financial management. This is a complicated environment. This is a complicated undertaking, and it's a significant shift from capital to revenue. So the financial implications of this are quite wide ranging for us, and we need to make sure that they're carefully managed. There is a 2-year high-level plan which was shared with the papers for this committee, which I won't go through in detail, but there is that plan there for members to have a look at. We are currently on track. We've reforecast a little bit because the Lot 2 migration support procurement took a bit longer than we were expecting, so that's pushed the timelines to the right, but we have now reforecast the overall timeframe for the programme. We're due to complete in March 2028, but we're reporting milestones to Welsh Government. There was a payment gateway or a budget release gateway at 18 months from business case approval. We've agreed a series of milestones that we will hit in order to get through that gateway, and we're well on track to do so at the moment. And obviously we're keeping Welsh Government abreast of that. So I think those are the main points I wanted to make. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for that summary, Sam. Anybody got any questions for Sam on the cloud migration program? Okay, let's start with Rowan.
So not so much a question, but I think one of the things I'd like to do is just ask that we know what a phenomenal piece of work this is. It's well overdue. I mean, it's been in the sense that it was surprising for me that investment hadn't been made many years ago, and it's one of those capabilities that is so fundamental to a modern infrastructure to deliver digital services to the NHS, and without it, it's one of the reasons that it makes it harder to be nimble, adaptive, and provide quality service. So I just want to congratulate Sam and the entire team behind him, because it's a massive lift. The one question I do have is what are our plans to communicate the benefits of the cloud first approach across the wider NHS in Wales, so that everyone in the NHS in Wales is able to gain maximum benefit from this investment?
Yeah, thank you, Rowan, and thanks for the kind words. I think that, the communication of benefits is really important. We're keen to be system leaders in this space and to use the experience that we're gaining through this process to help the wider system as best we can. So there's a cloud community of practice that we're in the process of setting up, which will have representation from relevant people across the wider system. We'll be using that to share the learnings, but also we've been presenting this progress to directors of digital periodically and so on. So we'll continue to do that. And I think we're talking to directors of digital about the MAC agreement, which is our Azure consumption agreement, and there are discounts that we're getting as part of that, which we're hoping to be able to extend to the wider system. So there are conversations ongoing about how we can help, financially as well as with the learnings. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Sam. Thanks for the question, Rowan. Let's go to Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, similar to Rowan, really, but because this work is so key to our long-term strategy, moving to our target operating model, skills of staff, etc. So, I mean, it's just the challenges that you've included in the presentation. Do any of them concern you in terms of achieving the March 28 time frame that we're working to?
Yeah, I think they're all concerning. That with these things have all got to come together, haven't they? And it is as I've said, a really complex undertaking, and it touches really most parts of the organisation in some way or another. So it is a relatively risky undertaking in and of itself. I think the one that is most important, and I guess therefore by extension most concerning, is the skills piece. There's a journey that we need to go on here, and we've asked a lot of our people already through the organisational change that we've undertaken. So supporting them on that journey, making sure that we're providing the right training through the programme, making sure that we're giving people as much opportunity to get involved as possible. Those are really crucial things to a successful outcome here. So that's the one that needs the most focus, I think.
Yeah, I concur with that, Sam. Right, let's go to Ridian.
Thanks, Sam. Particularly like the slides and some of the infographics. I'm taking actually by 31. Slide 31 about the benefits overview, and when one looks at those sort of high level, they can be applied to many programs. The thing that I would ask is, there's a massive digital dependency now for the delivery care, the always available, the always on. And one of the elements of that benefits is efficiency and innovation. And you used the term time to market. So the concept of an idea that would potentially help clinical care, the ability to discover and deliver. What I wanted to know was, how might this impact on the standardization of PAS, particularly PAS, because that is a limiting factor for our ability to move patients around the system safely.
Yeah, that's a good question, Gideon.
Yeah.
I think, well, so I guess that probably there are two things I would say to that. One is it gives us the opportunity to potentially build PAS into a much more modern system using cloud native architectures. So it should be easier to use, it should be more stable, it should be more consistent. Ideally we would, the natural direction of travel would be to have a single instance which would support consistent ways of working across the system, but we all know how difficult that is to realize. But I think the use of cloud technologies makes that more achievable than it would be to try and do it on-prem. I think where there's potentially a real and possibly more short-term benefit is in the use of AI technologies that we'll have access to in the cloud to help us with some of that standardization. We've already started talking to one of the hyperscalers particularly about that. How could we use some of the tooling that they've got access to look at, to take the PAS data and all of the inconsistencies that are in it and help us apply something consistent that would sit over the top of it and with mapping from one to the other, which would then give us the beginnings of a process to try and standardize the whole platform. So I think that's a real opportunity that we wouldn't have if we weren't moving to cloud.
Did you want to come back in, or are you happy? Yeah, I think he's happy. Right, so he did freeze for a second. Before I bring Marion in, Evan, did you want to come in on this point, or have you got a separate point?
No, just a separate general point.
Oh, okay, fine. In which case, I'll stick with the order. Marion next, please.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Sam, for an excellent, very clear and comprehensive presentation. Hugely important for us as an organisation and for the wider system. And I guess building on the challenge point in terms of taking staff with us, I think it's assuring to see that we've brought in a great deal of external expertise to drive that organisational change. We talk about Capacitus and Channel 3, that joint venture. What's the early feedback from the impact of that work in terms of taking our staff with us and upskilling them? And I guess my second question is a broader one, given and alluding to Rowan's early comments about the fact that, we are probably behind many other organisations in migrating to cloud. And great though it is that we are making such excellent progress now, what learning have we taken from other organisations who've gone on this journey before us? Just be helpful to understand that level of external engagement we took upon before embarking on this journey.
Yeah, thanks, Marion. So I guess the early feedback from the organisational change work is that so one of the things that they've done is looked at our cloud strategy, which was written two and a half, probably longer than that, 3 years ago, I think, and they've assessed that actually, the objectives that we set out at that point were the right ones, and we're largely on the right track. It's just taken us a long time to move from the original strategy to actually implementation, which is where we are now. I think the other sort of early feedback is that from an operating model perspective, we've still got quite some way to go, which I think was what we were expecting. We know that we're on a journey with this, but we've done some of the groundwork. So the product shift that is underway in the organisation is absolutely the right direction of travel. Some of the work that we've started to do with agile delivery and training is taking us in the right direction as well. So I don't think there's no surprises that have come out of the early work so far. I think it's just confirmed that the direction that we're taking is the right one, but there's quite some distance to go in order to get where we need to get to. Hence, my answer to Chris's question. This is the probably the biggest concern that we have, and the thing that we really need to get right. And then on the learning from other organisations, so we've done a fair bit of engagement both with other parts of the system. So other health organisations that we've spoken to understand how their cloud journeys have progressed. We've spoken to expert external organisations such as Gartner to get advice from them as well. So I think the journey to cloud is a fairly well-trodden path for organisations now, and I think the processes for doing so are quite standard. So this lift, shift and optimise approach that we're taking, that's pretty much what everybody's doing. So I think we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not doing anything which, we're not blazing a new trail. We're following a well-trodden path. So I'm pretty confident that we've learned from what's gone on elsewhere in industry, and we're doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Right, I'll take one last question from Evan, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Evan.
Well, it's a comment more than anything else. I think Sam's had several sort of probing questions, so I don't want to add to that.
Yeah.
As William Gibson said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, and I think where we are on cloud in DHCW, like any organisation moving from legacy structures to the future, it moves at different speeds. There are parts of DHCW that are on cloud and have been built cloud native. The app built on Azure, NDR is built on GCP. And there are many other organizations, like big banks particularly, still using mainframes, and at least we're not using mainframes in the background. So it is a progress. The pace of this is a really exciting program. I agree, and the slides are great for anybody who's watching who wants to check the pack. The visuals on the slides really convey the energy that's in this program. I think Sam and the team are going quickly, faster than the NDR program has gone, and the NDR program met several of the same challenges around reskilling and about equipping people with the tools to use the new cloud platform that is there. The main thing that I wanted to comment on, I think, was the difference between architecture and technology. So this is an opportunity for us to move to a cloud-based architecture, which gives us particularly scalability and resilience, and effectively a platform on tap. So that simplifies a lot of our management. We don't have to patch a cloud provider in the way that we do have to patch our on-prems. The temptation, and the NDR's team is struggling with this, is that within that architecture, the vendor of your cloud will encourage you to use their technologies. And the more you use their technologies, the tighter you're locked into their cloud. So we're very conscious as an organization that we want to retain flexibility, that we want to be a multi-cloud, so that we've got options. And to do that, we're trying to build through the target architecture program, the ability to containerize products. We're going to use Linux. We're going to prefer Linux to containerize, and that gives us more flexibility. And we can also wrap around AI tools and others so that we don't move from being locked into on-prem to move to being locked into a particular cloud provider, because we want to retain choice and flexibility within that architecture. But it's a really exciting program, and it's going very, very quickly, which is why we've got the external support coming in behind it, and there's all the things that Sam has described are there. And I think it's very exciting. And for some of our key products, it's going to liberate them as we lift, shift, and then replatform them to allow us to do things that are really difficult to do in their current on-premises architecture. And I think PaaS absolutely squarely is in the sights there.
Yep, I'd concur with that. Thanks, Evan, and thanks, Sam, for that presentation. Sam, if we could stick with you, please, and move on to Welsh Patient Admin System disaggregation and migration. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. So this is the closure report for this programme, which I'm very pleased to say. So effectively we have now successfully delivered the Bridgend transition. So I'll just run through what the programme was, what we did, in what kind of time frame, what the outcomes were, and then a bit of a high-level overview of some of the lessons that we've learned. So this programme was established to support the transition of the Bridgend region from what was at the time Abertau Bro Morgannwg, which Health Board, which became Swansea Bay, into Cwm Taf Morgannwg. And so to support this, a number of changes to IT systems were required, and data needed to be migrated from the Swansea Bay PAS to the Cwm Taf PAS. And there was a lot of impacts on other national systems as well, because these systems don't operate in isolation. They're all connected to one another. So there was a whole load of downstream impacts on systems that we needed to understand and test. The programme was originally due to be completed in 2020, but obviously the pandemic got in the way. and then other priorities such as the Betsy Cadwallader PAS mergers took place, but eventually we confirmed that the disaggregation needed to be completed in May 2025. So that was the new deadline that we were working to. We are now closing the program because effectively we have successfully delivered it. So the go live weekend, which was the 16th of May to the 19th of May, was successfully delivered. There was a warranty period which we put in place after that, which was just to work closely with the health boards to make sure that there weren't any issues that arose as a result of the migration, and that was concluded on the 30th of May. All of the open issues that were tracked that were associated with the go live were also closed on the 30th of that was on the 30th of September. So there was quite a long period of work afterwards to get through the open issues and to move back to the standard support offering, but that was concluded in September. And then we had a final program board on the 8th of December where we agreed that we would formally close the program. The aims and objectives were largely to enable the migration of the Bridgend data from Swansea Bay's PAS to Cwmtaf's PAS, and that was completed. And there were a number of objectives that were kind of subordinate to that, which were defining the scope of the data, establishing a process, ensuring that we move the right data, and then identifying the other downstream systems that were dependent on them, and ensuring that we were properly testing the outcomes of the migration work on those downstream systems. And those have all been successfully delivered and completed. The overall programme budget was 3.3 million of revenue, and that was split between the two health boards and Digital Health and Care Wales, and we did deliver that programme on budget, so the work was completed within the available budget from Welsh Government. There is a list of milestones which is included in the programme pack, which I won't run through. We can see that some of them did slip, so particularly some of the data migration and testing milestones moved. The testing actually was probably the most complicated part of the programme. It proved to be not necessarily more difficult than we were expecting, because I think we were always expecting it to be difficult, but it proved to be extremely complex, and it really was very hard to understand because of the number of systems which were impacted and the complexity of the data in the PAS instances. It was very difficult to get to a point where we had a level of confidence going into the migration, but all that confidence came very close to the actual point of migration. We were looking to be able to do testing over a much longer duration of time and get to a position where that confidence was gradually building, but actually it didn't really work out like that, and the confidence was was still probably in the kind of amber red point right up until prior to the migration, but then it all came together at the end as a result of a lot of very hard, diligent work by teams across all three organisations. So we were able to hold to the overall date, but as I say, that testing and data migration was extremely complicated. I think lessons learned, again, they're in the pack. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think the key one for me, well, there are two really for me. I think we should have had a look at program structures earlier than we did, because the program ran for so long. I think we set up a structure which then proved to be quite difficult to operate across the three organisations, and there were two separate programs running within DHCW, one looking at the data migration, one looking at the testing of all of the downstream systems, and I think we should have combined those into a single program, and we would have been much more joined up if we had. And the other learning for me really is around the testing and the confidence. We had to build a test environment from scratch in order to do this, and that took months, and that was one of the reasons that we were delayed. So we need to be much better at that, and just the sheer complexity of the testing that we had to undertake was, it added a huge amount of overhead to the program. So we need to think very carefully about how we do that differently. And to Rhyddian's points about PAS in the previous session, part of the reason that this was so complicated is because we've got very different ways of working and different data standards and so on and so on in use across all of the different PAS instances in Wales. So one of the major learnings is next time, if we're going to do this again, we need to find a better way. And really, had we had single PAS instances, or at least consistency, we wouldn't have had to do this at all. So range of closure activities, really, I think I've covered them. So we completed the extended support period in September. We had the final programme board in December. All of the outstanding issues are now closed. All remaining risks have been transferred back to business as usual risk registers, so they're not sitting on programme risk registers anymore. And the final programme closure and lessons learned report has been approved at the programme board and is obviously submitted to this committee as well. So thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that summary, Sam. We've got a few questions. Let's go to Rowan first.
Hi Sam. So that's a really helpful piece of analysis, but I think it's just worth reflecting on the testing point, not just through the lens of testing, but the fact that the environments that you need to build are so complex, and there are different configurations being operated in each health board. There is an ongoing cost there, right, that surfaces at test, but is being carried by the wider system all the time. And have we, in terms of benefits optimization, had a sort of go at estimating what that cost is? Because it really struck me during last week's public assurance that some of us did with Welsh Government, that the kind of high level decisions that get made on, you know, buy versus build decisions, for example, all of those inherent cost overheads that get created and carried sit outside of the business cases that so often we're asked to make decisions on. And if we're really going to drive for efficiency, we need to get our arms around some kind of estimate. And it's not for us to say what they are, but what is the work that's going on across directors of digital to understand what that investment actually is, because I suspect it's significant if, when we come to testing, that is such a large burden in terms of delivering these programs.
Yeah, thanks, Rowan. And we see this all the time, don't we? That testing is the thing that slows our programs down. We've seen that in LIMS and RISP as well. I think in terms of the cost, you know, the £3.3 million that we've spent on this program, you know, you could argue you wouldn't have to spend that at all if we'd been running on single instances of PAS, because there wouldn't have been any data migration required, or there might have been some, you know, some tweaking of values or something, but it certainly wouldn't have been the major migration that we've had to undertake now. And we talk a lot about benefits, but we haven't really, there's a quantification of disbenefits of the current approach that perhaps we need to think about, isn't there? And, you know, honestly, I'm not sure that is being done anywhere at the moment. I think national target architecture would probably be where we would start to pick some of this up in terms of the cost of moving away from where we are now into a better place, and the benefits that would come along with doing that. I think that would be coming out of individual business cases.
And I think that's a very fair answer, Sam. I just think that, you know, we expose it in that test moment and in the migration projects, but the system is carrying that additional cost all the time because those different configurations have to be administered. And given how tight money is in the system, you know, that those are investments or costs that could be invested in other functionality, which I think the system would appreciate. So I think it's something to think about.
Okay, let's go to Eva next.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Sam. So internally, we've dived into the technical complexity of what was done, and I just want to reinforce first, you know, Sam's comments about how messy the data is. PAS is quite an old system. It's configured and managed by each health board in their own environment, and so are the integration hubs, which are downstream. And this is a really good example of how we are supporting two health boards to manage their systems and to support them. And I think, you know, we are seeing the consequences of some of the decisions that were made historically, or some of the circumstances that evolved historically, and that's what's caused it to be, really so complicated and so challenging. I think firstly it's a good example of how we work with stakeholders to support health boards. There's this view that we're somehow separate, but we're not. In this, most of the money went to Cwm Taf Morgannwg to support them in their own organisation. We were running a coordinating and a sort of an expert leadership type of role, bringing our capability and capacity on the testing and the management of the data in the system to bear to support those health boards. The timetable is interesting. The announcement of the boundary change was in 2018. It took effect in 2019. The health boards themselves couldn't find the resources, the money, the cost to do that migration, and so there are quite some delays. And we're 8 years on almost from the original announcement of the migration. And I think my biggest point is that this is a hidden complexity in all of our systems. It's not unique to PAS. And when we introduce new vendor systems, whatever they are, we have to integrate to them, and we need to feed data to them. We have to tidy up the data, we have to regularize the data, and it's highly inconsistent across the system. So as Sam said, if everybody was on a single instance configured in the same way, it wouldn't have taken us 8 years and £3.5 million to do this. But those types of costs and that burden is hidden in virtually every single program that we run. And I think there's a much better awareness of it. Everybody accepts in principle now the need to standardize on data, to standardize configuration, to conform to standards. But when it comes down to it, and it makes contact with the real world, it can still be quite challenging. And I think we have to challenge ourselves as a system. We are currently implementing multiple separate systems for medicines administration. We have multiple instances of a maternity system implemented by each health board. The learning from Scotland is that even if everybody's using the same maternity system, very, very quickly, organizations will start to configure them differently. And that will store up for us in future the sort of technical debt that we've just seen in this program. So I think it's really good that we're bringing that out in this public meeting to try to bring that to life. It's something that we're working on with the digital directors all the time, but it's a big challenge for the system.
Agreed. Thanks, Ivan. Marion.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam. Really appreciate the clarity of the lessons learned table at the end of your slide pack. And it's building, I guess, in terms of what we've just recently talked about, in terms of the learning from the complexity of the data migration. And I guess it's a question, a broader question about how we ensure across the piece all these different elements of lessons learned, the learning that we've had across this programme, now that it's been closed. How do we ensure that the detail of that learning is embedded across the organisation in everything we do? You talk about the importance of establishing a robust programme governance structure. I think we feel certainly assured that we are doing that. That's just one example, but how are we properly embedding the learning across the organisation? And it's probably a broader point than just for you, Sam.
Yes, thank you, Marion. So I think in terms of lessons we learn as an organisation, they probably fall into two kind of categories. So there's the lessons we learn from major incidents, which, as they occur, and we pick those up through our incident review and learning group, and they get fed back into operating processes via that route. I think the lessons we're learning through programs are probably coming more through the PMO and the program management interface in that regard. So I don't know whether Ivan wants to comment more on how we sort of feed those back into the overall way in which we structure programs.
Well, we've got Michelle, who chairs the Incident Review and Learning Group, which is part of our lessons learned. And also earlier we looked at our internal audit report on programme, which brings out various lessons as well. Through a different mechanism, we track all the actions and recommendations from our internal audit, and then show how we respond on that. I think it's a really good question because it's a challenge. It's quite easy to run a lessons learned log. And I think there was an internal audit recommendation from mid 2025 that we should refresh and maintain a log, but very quickly a log becomes a sequence of tens or hundreds of statements. And what we have to do is to try to really bring to life and make impactful, I suppose, so that people intuitively and instinctively engage with that type of thing. I think PAS is a really good example. I've lost count of how many people reflect back on how complicated the PAS migration has been, how long it's taken, and how much it's cost. And that's usually, it's like, well, let's try to avoid the need for that in future. That type of reflection. And my final comment on this is lessons learned is all very well, but it's lessons applied that matters.
Yeah.
You can learn as many lessons as you want, but if you don't apply them to change your behavior, then they don't have a lot of impact, do they? So we're quite focused on that. So we do have all of the processes, but we have to find ways to bring that process to life and then to apply those lessons back. And in other areas, I think we're trying to do that through a program typology. We'll impose a structure to channel the way that we design and build programs to address some of the lessons from this program and from many others. So yeah, I want to reassure the committee there's a lot of thinking about how we do that, and the lessons learned processes we have are necessary, but they're not sufficient, and we're very conscious that we've got to do more than that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just before having Chris in, who's next, Michelle, did you want to come in on this point, or have you got something separate you wanted to write?
No, it was on this point, if I may. Thank you, David,
Yeah.
because Eva makes a really good point about bringing lessons to life, isn't it? And how do we make sure that we don't kind of move on and forget all the useful things that we learned? So Sam, yeah, thank you. Helpfully mentioned the incident review and learning group, and colleagues will know that we actually feed into one of our other committees in terms of incident review and learning. But the folks who are leading that particular programme that Sam has been updating on, will come to that group, and they will run through a similar presentation, and we will discuss then, it's a bit of a kind of multidisciplinary group, we will discuss the aspects of learning and how those are best applied. And they will also come to, so there's quite a bit of reflection, we've got a kind of professional forum of our project and programme folks, and again they will share that presentation, and there will be discussion in terms of, and I think that some of the discussion actually is as helpful as the reports, isn't it? Because that makes it kind of more real. Colleagues talk to colleagues, they think about, okay, how would we do that, and how would we apply that in the projects and programmes? And then I think, as Ivan covered there, the whole kind of typology of trying to build this in through deliberate design. So, reflecting on some of these things at the beginning of a project or programme, building it in, reflecting through our project playbook, etc., so that these things are there for us to consider as we're developing new projects and programmes. So there's quite a lot. I think we could do more in this space, as Ivan said. So we're trying to look at the various kind of routes in and the mechanisms to help people to navigate through this. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle, Ivan, and good question, Marion. Let's move on to Chris.
Thanks, David. Yeah, and it's a similar comment to Marion's in some ways, but I was just going to reflect on escalation. So we're in escalation for concern over the pace of delivery of major programs, and Sam's just highlighted, hasn't he, through lessons learned, what has caused this to take as long and delay things. And the lessons learned, we know Michelle's done an excellent lessons learned summary with themes from a number of years, and this comes up. So I think through our escalation response, kind of the phase 2 plan, which we'll come on to talk to later, I think we need to look at testing, data migration, and challenge ourselves and the system. If we know this is something that constantly, as Ivan said, again and again causes delays, we've seen it with PAS, we've seen it with diagnostics at the moment, what can we do differently? That doesn't mean DHCW, that means the system, I think. What can the system do differently moving forward that would mean it doesn't delay programs? Because that's what the escalation approach needs to do. It needs to challenge areas where it's causing delays to program delivery. Well, we know this is one, don't we? So I think we need to find a way to work collectively with partners to identify, is there an alternative approach to take? Because the testing and the data migration element is going to be complex for future systems and programs. So what will we do differently? I think that's something we probably need to reflect on.
Yeah, good point, Chris. Sam, did you want to come back, or should we move to Iridian?
Just to agree with Chris, I think it's absolutely something we need to take away from this and try and find a different way.
Yeah, I'd concur with that. Iridian.
Thanks, David. I'm going to give a slightly different view on this, as you'd expect. So I've been a consultant in Princess Wales Hospital for 15 years. The first decade of that was relatively straightforward. I was using a system that I was familiar with and hadn't changed. I was in an organisation where there were 4 different hospitals. It was Abertawe, Bro Morgannwg. The reason I raised the 4 is there were 4 different case record numbers. So that's 4 sets of notes from 4 environments that had to arrive in clinic for me to have a full vision. When we transitioned from Abertawe, Bro Morgannwg to Cwm Taf, I was joining an organisation that also had 3 different case record numbers. So to see a patient, I now needed 7 sets of notes because wherever that patient had been. So this is a problem related to the paper being dependent on a case record number, not an NHS number. And it is fundamental. This is fundamental. The ability to identify a patient through a unique identifier, meaning that you can get the clinicians, get the data in front of the clinicians. So there are 8 organisations that use PAS. Cardiff and Vale don't use PAS. They have their own PAS. We have different versions of that PAS, ranging from 2023 to 2025, depending on the choice of an organisation to implement the functionality. Now, I thought Marion's comment was absolutely, we said, how do you embed the lessons? Well, unfortunately, Marion, the organisations involved, their senior leadership has changed during that period. So there's no organisational memory across those. So it's difficult to embed that, but we should make sure that the lessons learned are publicised. So this is a lesson in the management of the tills. I'm going to put it to you, David. Okay, so you can go to any shop, right? But I've chosen Waitrose. Okay, and Waitrose has 421 stores across the UK. They have the same till in every shop. It allows them to do stock control in a way that is standardised, visible. They can performance management. Patient administration systems are not clinical systems. They are people. Where are they in the system? That's what they're for. And if we have variation in the standards and we don't have compliance to standards that are introduced, we won't know where the people are and we won't know those that need to be treated in whatever order. So I think the next time here is we don't move from a locally configured till to another locally configured till. What we do is we move to a unique, standardized, fresh, new till. And I think that's the organizational memory that needs to hold tight. And hopefully, one day, I won't need these 7 sets of notes, David, to see people in clinic. Thanks.
No, really good points. Thanks, Ridian. And Rowan.
I just want to make the point that the NHS number was a data standard that was issued in 2015, I think, Ridian, if I've been listening to you over the last 4 years.
For the 4th time it was issued. 4th time, the last time it was issued was 2015-049. Yeah.
Okay. So there is a fundamental governance gap, right? That is ensuring that information in the NHS in Wales is adhering to the standards, and I think that's another lesson that we also need to learn. Okay, I'll say no more.
No, if I may, before we move on, so there's 2 big issues for me that come out of that. With the fragmentation in the system creates complexity when we have to do things like this project. And Ridian's highlighted another issue, which is it's not just the IT that's causing us problems. We're actually making life difficult for clinicians, which is something we should avoid at all costs. So there's something we need to look into in this space. I think it's around governance. Okay, we are running over slightly, so let's move on to the next agenda item, which is GP Systems Framework. And for this, we're going to go to Sam Hall.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Sam Hall. I'm Director for Primary, Community and Mental Health Digital Services at DHCW, and I'm just going to talk you through our GP Systems Framework and give an update on that. So the GP Systems Framework provides GP clinical systems and services across Wales. It's managed by DHCW, and that's done on behalf of the health boards and is funded by Welsh Government. there's 369 practices across Wales, and they benefit from IT systems under those health board contracts, but all of their tech and their systems are delivered by DHCW under this framework. So the GP systems are very complex. They provide rich functionality, including things like appointments, referrals, prescribing, clinical decision support, document management, workflow, and they also support citizen access via the NHS Wales app. So they do a whole host of things, and they are absolutely critical to the function and the availability of GPs across Wales. It is a system they cannot do without. Also that GP created patient information that system manages is key data, and it's a key source of information for the Welsh Clinical Portal, and also enables the identification of patients eligible for vaccinations and screening, etc. So it does a myriad things within this one system. The market for GP systems is quite small. Michelle will know a lot more about this than I do. She'll know the history about it, but there are literally only a handful in use across the whole of the UK. GPs have always looked for choice, as you can imagine. However, with a relatively small number of practices in Wales, it has become over time more challenging to secure enough market share to make Wales a viable proposition. So we hold a mini competition, which is a process which enables GP system choice, and we did that in 2023. One of the suppliers that we had, IMPS, did not secure the number of practices it needed, so they set a threshold, and that they believe makes it a viable proposition for them. If it falls below that threshold, then they know that it will be difficult for them to actually support the business in Wales. So they didn't get enough. So it wasn't viable for them to provide GP systems in Wales, and they made a business decision to withdraw in January 2024. This triggered a project to migrate the 198 practices to EMIS Web, which was the system that was left in the market in Wales. So we kicked off a migration project, and we've talked about the migration previously, but the objective was to complete the migration safely with as minimal disruption for the practice as possible, with a key benefit being service continuity, not have practices out of action for any longer than is necessary, because that puts a pressure on other practices in the area, but also it's unnecessary worry and stress for patients in that area too. So we did this in a phased approach. There were a number of practices, 110, who actually self-selected. They had made a decision to move to EMIS anyway, and that left 88 practices who didn't want to move for a variety of reasons, mainly because they were used to using the IMPS solution, but also because this is a business decision for practices as well, and they had to factor in the cost of that change and the disruption to their staff, training, etc. We refer to these within our terminology as forced migrations, because these people didn't choose to go of their own free will. So the original completion that we had planned was for January 2027. But we had to revise that due to an emerging challenge, which if you follow the slides, there's a few pictures in the slides which show the complexity of what it means to move from one system to another. There is a lot of data, obviously, that needs to be moved. There's a lot of QA that needs to go on, but there's lots of other things that need to be plugged into the system to make sure that it works for the GP. But we had probably the biggest and unforeseen challenge, and that was that IMPS, the supplier that was leaving the market, entered administration in December 2024. This affected 154 outstanding migrations and over 1.3 million patients. So DHCW initiated a major incident response and successfully supported the continuity of those services until a sale to one advanced the incoming buyer happened in August 2025. So we had to really set up quite quickly that incident and moved to look at a few of the really critical things that we needed to do under that challenge, and with the main issue being, how do we maintain the service if things happened while that was happening? So we did that by bringing in, we brought in some extra support to help us do that. And then we completed an internal retrospective in September, looking at the key takeaways from that. And we will be, so one of the things I think that was really important to us and that came out very strongly was that business continuity was something that was really highlighted during this challenge period, because the plans needed to be improved for practices and health boards for loss of GP practice services. So one of the things that we spoke really at length with the practices and with the health boards, and we were holding public sessions to talk about this. But the maintenance of the system was really important to us. But if something had happened and for some reason there had been supplier loss, what would happen, and how would those business continuity plans be sprung into action? And how were they documented, and how could they just be picked up and used? And so we found, in talking to stakeholders, that they didn't necessarily appreciate the potential impact on the downstream services, and then were unclear maybe on some of the actions that were needed to make sure that that didn't happen should the worst thing happen and the GP system be out of action for whatever purpose. So the GP practices had maintained business continuity plans, but it was clear as we started to go through this process that if it was for more than a couple of days, the health boards then did not necessarily have really strong plans to deal with the loss of GP practice services for a longer term. So it's been really interesting learning, and we've worked with the health boards on that to look at how we can pick that up and support them in that business continuity in the future, in what we would term as an event that should never happen. As we looked further into that retrospective, we also identified a number of other things that came as a highlight from this challenge, and we think there's still quite a bit of work to do in this space. And again, Michelle was with us right the way through this process, and it was quite scary going through some of this stuff, because there were a lot of moving parts. There were other countries involved, so we had a lot of pieces that we needed to keep going. But one of the things that we did was make sure we pulled together a list of things that we know need to happen in the future. So one is that the framework for undertaking financial checks on our suppliers. That's something that is obviously that we would do, but we, as much as we can do to strengthen that, we would want to review the standard, our standard operating practice on procurement in exceptional circumstances, because this is what happened here. This was an exceptional circumstance, and so we had to learn a lot about how we move through the different financial controls and governance requirements needed for this, and there was a lot that we might have done for the first time because we hadn't been in that situation before. Strengthen and maintain the exit plans for key contracts. Again, really important. We want to develop a set of guiding principles and a checklist for managing critical incidents, and we're working with our service management team around doing some of that, and we want to be able to reference that in the future for any similar scenario. And then data access and recovery. Obviously, there's a lot of data in each of those GP systems, and how do we explore and implement options to ensure access to critical data in the event of a supplier failure? So that was something that we had lots of conversations around here in DHCW around if we couldn't access the data for whatever reason, how would we make sure that that was backed up, and how could we make alternative data access arrangements? So there was a lot of learning that came out of the challenge, and I think those are things that we're still taking forward now, and we're going to be working on for the future. But it was quite a challenging time. We're really glad that we're now in this more stable period. What it did have is it had an impact on that plan. So the plan that I mentioned at the beginning around we were meant to be completing this at 2 practices a week, which meant we would have completed towards the end of this year. We now have brought that forward. So migration cadence has increased from 2 to 4 practices per week, enabling us to be able to complete and to be on that single supplier in May 2026. So we literally are just entering the last couple of months of that work. And there's another reason for us doing that, for us bringing it forward, besides the challenges that we've had with the supplier leaving the system, but it's also because we want to maximise the impact of the electronic prescribing that's been rolled out across Wales. So we need to all be on the single supplier into EMIS so that can be enabled. That will also allow us to bring that implementation to a successful conclusion in November 2026. So again, some months sooner than we had anticipated. We do have to look at this as it's almost been it was a necessary thing that we had to do. We were compelled to do it. We needed to migrate in this way, but it has given us opportunity to give the advantage that we have, and even you can tell us exactly what that advantage is across Wales in time saved for moving to EPS. So there is the benefit. There is a silver lining in what was quite a stressful cloud. So where we are today, and summary of where we are is 129 of the 193 practices have migrated. So that is, we're on track to complete by the end of May. And we have successfully moved 3,841 staff into the new systems. And there's been minimal disruption to 1.1 million patients so far, and we've achieved in feedback that we're getting from practices, we've achieved a 95% plus positive feedback and that is in how our teams and the supplier team has worked together to support the practices. It's really important. We have been in a real partnership with EMIS in doing this, and we have given the practices the opportunity to tell us, and we've learnt on that as we've gone along, what could we have done better? Is there something we could have done quicker? What more support could we give? And we have fed that back in. We're working very, very closely with the supplier, and I think 95% positive feedback, considering the disruption that you do have, is it's pretty good. And then we've got some next steps. So obviously the migrations are completed by May 2026. We then need to complete the decommissioning of the IMPS now one advanced system by Q2. So that's Q2 of the new year. Project closure and realization of the single supplier benefits. And this is really important to us because moving to a single supplier obviously was not a choice by a lot of the GPs. So we have to really look at what the benefit is for this and why it actually it is a sensible position to be in. So for us, the management of a single supplier reduces our overheads, getting things changed and moved and improvements made and rolled out to 2 different suppliers, as we've already discussed. Having different systems adds a layer of complexity that quite often is not necessary. So we can maximize the benefit of that. Easier sharing of clinical information between practices. We're sharing agreements are in place, so people move between practices, but also practices come together and they break apart as well sometimes into other. So sharing of that information is really critical. And also locums and community staff that move between practices. It was actually quite telling when you talk to staff in those areas. They would lean towards one system or another because it was the one that they were familiar with, and some wouldn't actually. They weren't keen to take work in a practice that was on a system that they weren't used to and they weren't comfortable with. And now, obviously, moving to one system, there is only one set of things in there that you need to learn. There is only one thing that it doesn't become a consideration now that you would have to pick up something new on top of moving to another practice. And then also really important to us, as I mentioned, is to leverage that strategic partnership with Optum, who is now the sole supplier of that we have in Wales. We have regular conversations with them. The teams meet with them pretty much weekly anyway. We're out in practices with them, but then we also have strategic level conversations that Helen, myself, and Michelle are involved in, where we talk about, well, now you're actually supporting the whole of Wales. What leverage can we have from that relationship into making things better for our practices, and for our GPs across Wales, and ultimately our patients? So there is more to do. There is more to improve, but we're now in that position to really make that happen. And I must say that they have been very receptive to some of the ideas and the innovations we'd like to make. So that was a quick canter through that. Obviously, it would have been slightly more boring an update had we not had the big challenge in the middle.
It would have been. Yeah, we've had several updates on the challenges you've faced, Sam. And before I bring Ruth and Rydian in, just like to thank the team for the response and the pace at which you've managed to migrate GP practices. Ruth, let's start with you.
Thanks, Sam. I mean, I would echo David's comments there. It's been a fantastic effort, and don't underestimate the amount of work that has gone into this. My question is really about the way of working across this program, where we've successfully delivered. We've delivered early. We've engaged our stakeholders. What has been so different about the way of working on this program that has meant we've been able to do that in comparison to where we've struggled across some of our other programs? I don't expect you to answer the other programs question, but what is it that you've done differently that has meant we've been able to be successful here?
I think there's a really simple answer to that, and is that we do most things for GPs. We have that relationship directly with the GPs. We supply their systems, we supply their kit, and I hope that we have a level of trust because of that relationship that allows us to often ask them to do difficult things, because we are asking them to move their timelines, to shift things around, to pick up training, to accommodate them having a couple of people from my team actually on site with them, working alongside them to do things which might always not always be great, might not always be welcome. They might have other things they need to do as well. But I would say primarily it's because we do most of the things for them when it comes to technology, down to we supply their computers. They are used to calling us if something goes wrong, and we have the control to fix that because it is the thing that we deliver. In other areas, and be Sam's frustration in secondary care space, we're quite often called on to fix things that we have no control over fixing, and obviously that you lose that. You lose some of that. And I think the other thing that I would say in this is that because moving the migrations into what became a major incident, the amount of people across the organisation that stopped and flexed to support us, Michelle's team, the clinical staff, my AMDs that were they were working under the things, they had to help us. What is it we need to focus on for the GPs? Doing the public updates really helped as well. We've done them for two things now. Rydian started them with Audit Plus updates, and I did them for the IMPS updates, where this was a call to anyone that wants an update on this. You can ask us questions. We're in front of you. It wasn't through a program board kind of structure. It was just a turn up if you're worried. Now is the time to say. So it was much more of a that kind of hands-on type communication that maybe we don't do so much in other spaces, because actually it's quite time consuming to prep some of those things. It was a lot. We just felt that it was necessary for this because the level of worry was palpable across the system. It really was there. But yeah, I think the bottom line is just because we do everything.
Good point. Rydian.
Thanks. I've got a couple of comments. It was remiss of me not to thank the previous Sam for his excellent slides, and I thank the current Sam for excellent slides. So primary care is paperless. Some people might think primary care is a bit of a fragile service. We're now 370 practices across Wales. You know, when I sort of 10 years ago, there were about 100 more. We've got about 1,500 full-time equivalent GPs across Wales. About 1,000 of those full-time equivalents are partners. It's a business. And I'm very pleased, Sam, that you sort of highlighted there was a business decision in terms of the choice. What I think has been excellent and has demonstrated again how good DHCW are in a crisis is there was a burning platform, there was a tight timeline, people worked collaboratively with very engaging primary care, actually. Once that understanding of there is no choice, this is the problem, everyone pushed together, and that really shows the power of collective working. So I'm really pleased you highlighted some of the benefits. You're right about the locum workforce. Some of them won't work in some practices that have a different user interface, different system. Also, we have to be aware of the merger of practices. That can, when a practice, for want of a better word, chucks in its keys, and then it's taken over by another one. If they're on a different system, there's a data migration issue. There are real benefits for a once for Wales approach to this. And I suppose I'll finish by making the comment that GPC Wales actually acknowledged the excellent work of DHCW in a public accounts committee. And that is quite something. I don't think we felt the acknowledgement perhaps from Secretary Care for the work that we did in the discussion on the previous agenda item. So they appreciate us, we work well, and it's a credit to the teams across the organisation. Thanks.
Yeah, well said, Rydian. Marion.
Well, just to echo Rydian's comments in a sense, I mean, it's so heartening to read that positive feedback from users across primary care, and it's a real tribute to the team that's been leading on this programme. I have spoken to a number of GPs who have shared with me in the past the frustration, as Rydian mentioned now, of having to learn a new system if they work across more than one GP practice, as increasingly many GPs do. They share their working life between a number of different practices. So this is going to be a game changer long term. It gets rid of that inconsistency, and I know it will be hugely welcomed by those GPs and is being hugely welcomed by GPs who no longer are having to navigate two different systems. So thank you to the team and well done.
Agreed, Marion. Thanks for that excellent update, Sam, and the questions. That concludes this section of the agenda. As a committee, we've been asked to note these reports for assurance. And with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is digital services for patients and public programme governance changes. And for this, we're going to stick with you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is for noting, but we thought it was, it's really important to bring this to the attention of this committee. So as you're aware, the DSPP programme that has delivered the app, which is now in its public beta, that's been delivered. The programme is due to end in March, and so as it moves out of its programme world, it will move into primary community mental health, into our directorate, to be taken on as in, it's a platform, it's a product. It doesn't deliver health services in any way. What it does is enables people to be able to access services and information that they need, and it becomes a real tool to support that end-to-end service delivery across healthcare. So what we have is the app that is stable, and it's out there being used by hundreds of thousands of people across Wales. So the programme has delivered something which now needs to go into the next phase. We're going to take that into our product operating model. So it will move. There's an in-house team has been set up. and that in-house team will focus on the things that are really important for something like the product, like an app. So user centricity, what is it that the users really want? How do we prioritize? How do we make sure those things are the things that are delivered? Continuous improvement. How do we keep delivering on the foundations that the program has put there for us? It did the heavy lifting on building. How do we get the most from that? How do we really make it a valuable tool across healthcare? And end-to-end ownership. So, how do we make sure that those services that are end-to-end are actually owned within that product, so we can see how it goes along, how it drops in and out of a patient's life as they go through different healthcare scenarios. At what point do they come in and out of using the app, and where does the app help them, and what are the things that the app can do to make that much more seamless for them and more helpful. And how do we make a sustainable multidisciplinary team, or teams, which is likely to be a number of teams that can work on different elements of the app at the same time to deliver much quicker benefit to patients? So that's part of the establishing the teams. And then how do we make sure that we're ploughing back in those evidence-based and value-led decisions, basically, so that we are prioritizing the right things to do and to make the app better. So governance currently is governed through a program board. That program board is in place. Myself and Margaret, Deputy Director, we've been attending the programme board for the last couple of months, and we will do until April. And we're giving an update on those transition and how that's happening and moving into the product world. But from April, there needs to be a new governance structure set up. So we have identified 3 tiers of governance. So a patient-facing digital services oversight group is the top tier, and this is in the slides. That will have links from the DDAP leadership and delivery groups, and we need that to provide the strategic and policy regarding health outcomes. So, what is it we're looking for? Health. What are we looking for in those patient-facing digital services? How do we maximise the value that we're getting from it? And also to ensure that we've got alignment across the system. There's no point us going out of kilter with other developments and other policy decisions that are being taken across. And so the membership of that is we're still establishing the membership, and we're talking to Welsh Government about that, but it's likely to be Welsh Government policy, NHS P&I, Public Health Wales, WAST in the ambulance service, health boards, of course, DHCW, and really importantly is the clinical leadership. We need at that level in that oversight space. And then under that we have the NHS Wales app product team. These are the people that are actually doing the delivery. This is where we really want to talk to our clinical world, but also to the patients themselves. This is where the user-centered design, information and evidence gets brought. This is where we balance the strategic needs and the policy direction with the user needs and along that development roadmap. So how do we make both of those things work in tandem? And also, how do we make sure that multidisciplinary team with the clinicians, with the patients, with the policy leads all are again working in the same direction to give the most benefit possible? There is a backlog, as you can imagine, of hundreds of things that people would like to see in the app. How do we make sure that we're picking the most beneficial things? What is it that will deliver the biggest impact? They will likely to be those joined up services that take you throughout a pathway. So how do we make sure that the case for those is really clear and really understood, and what the users need from that is primary in the delivery? And then we will also have the user groups, which will very much support the delivery. We already hear from patients. We've got a mechanism through that DSPP have set up, but we'd actually want to expand on that and do more testing, more user research out there with people using the app, and also to understand a lot more around the product insight. So what is it that people using the app are telling us? Quite often this is, instead of going out there and asking people, it's put that monitoring, that automated monitoring in, and leadership lines in to understand things like what functionality in the app are people finding really easy to use, and what are they struggling with? What bits of that usability can we reuse in other areas on the app? So if people really find something very easy to use, how can we use that again in another place? Because we know then people will pick it up and it'll get used more. We want to know where people drop off, where they're actually finding things are not that useful. So do we then improve that, or is it something that we might actually say that isn't something we want to continue because it's not useful for people, and it might just be taking up space, and it might not be something that is valuable. So that is there's quite a big structure there around that monitoring. We want to have that user group to be able to really inform that. So we'll get a lot of that from usage of the app, that kind of quantitative stuff. Then we want that sentiment from the people that are actually using it, and that comes at that user group level. So as I said, it's all explained in there a little bit more in some pictures in the slide deck, but essentially it's replacing that overarching kind of program wrap with that 3 level of information. We're also looking at, and Michelle and the team, my team and others actually are looking currently, and I'm not sure whether Michelle wanted to or Ivan actually wanted to comment on this, on how we report that. So how do we show product reporting and product development and product roadmap alongside some of the major programs, because we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are continuously delivering and we are improving and we are using the investment in the right way. And this is a new way for us to work, but the app is something where we know that the focus will be on getting value quickly. And making sure that we're doing what patients really need us to do. So there is something for us there in how do we report that back. Obviously, we'd be reporting the programme here, but not necessarily products.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that summary, Sam. This is a significant point in the programme where it's moving from a programme into a product, so we should mark that. Ruth.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really pleased we've got to this stage. My one question is, why are we actually waiting until April to make the change in governance? Why couldn't we do it tomorrow? Or if not tomorrow, I'll give you until Monday. What's the what I think it feels like we're at the point we all know that it's the right thing to do. We're there ready to go. Why delay until April?
So, I mean, I'm sure Ivan can come in a second, but I mean, there were a couple of things for me from the product side of things, and the first one is setting up of those groups. So we're currently working through the membership of those groups, and one of the comments that I made around making sure that we have that clinical, the clinical voice in those groups to get space for clinicians to attend some of our groups. We need to give them a good 6 weeks notice to get that in. So we're currently looking at that, working out who those memberships are, and getting those things in the diary. So to be honest, April is probably the soonest we could do that anyway, because we wouldn't get space for them to move their clinics that easily. But also we are still establishing some of the ways of working in the team, and we've got some gaps. We're rapidly filling up some of the gaps in that in the app team, so that we can take up the slack that the program is currently filling for us. And there's quite a bit of transition work too. There's paperwork that needs to come across from the app on certain things. So there's a team which is kind of working between my team and the program at the moment to do that transition piece. I think we would want to do that quicker if we could, but actually this is about the right pace that we can do it at. I think we would miss something, or we would potential to miss something if we tried to rush to that. But Ivan, obviously, as a program lead, can explain that.
Okay. Ivan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it'd be nice to just, switch without warning over a weekend. But our experience shows that we need to prepare, and we take a lot more comfort and confidence from having set up the new arrangements and then closing down the old arrangements. I can speak from personal experience in government, having closed down certain national digital governance arrangements, and then COVID hit us smack in the face, and we went through a long period of not having any national governance for digital. So I think it's very sensible to set up the new governance and then to close down the old. There's also sort of a handover, so it helps that to have the new recipient. There's no point, let's take a rugby metaphor, right? There's no point passing the ball if there's nobody there to catch it. So let's make sure there's somebody there to catch it. I just wanted to say a couple of comments on the program governance. As it says in the document, it's achieved its program objectives. Programs are intended to be for a limited period of time to achieve a particular task. We'll have a closure report, a formal closure report in due course. But I think I'm comfortable that the program has done that. I want to reflect that the program has changed its sort of its makeup and configuration several times during the last few years as the app has gone through different phases. There's been a change to the subgroups in the program board. There's been a change to the membership of the program board, because you need something different when you're in the early design phase to when you're in the initial sort of alpha and early beta phase to where we are now, which is a much more mature product with well over 500,000 people using it daily. They're different flavors, and we have flexed the program governance throughout that period into 3 recognizable phases, really. But I think we've come to the end of how you could flex conventional program governance, given the scale of the app and given its persistence. It is going to be with us for a long, long time, and we're moving out of the time when a program is the suitable approach. Underneath the hood, there's going to be a lot of continuity. The app is built on a cloud architecture. It's got an open architecture to it. It works through work packages and sprints, and that type of approach. There will be some changes to that as we move it into the DHCW space and we get more direct control on it. And we'll also be changing the way that we engage with users. But there are feedback panels. We use Qualtrics as a mechanism within the app itself. We seek patient input. We'll just flex those to move them much more clearly into the product space. So as I think I've said before, certainly in the IMTP, it's evolution rather than revolution. But this is a really important and quite a big step for us. And it's something that hopefully we'll learn a lot from, because in future other programs also will need to get through this sort of transition phase. And the longer the run up we get to think about how programs exit from program and into continuing sort of product operating models, the better we should get at that. So it's timely. Take your points, Ruth. It'd be good to get it even more quickly. But we've got a clear plan. Teams are working very effectively together. We all understand where we're headed. We've built the resources and capacity that we need. So Sam and I have got a good level of confidence that we'll be there in April with the new governance arrangements in place.
And to be fair, Ivan, we didn't just decide this yesterday.
Oh no,
this has been months in the planning, so it wouldn't be a shock to you if we went on Monday. But certainly, what I would want to see is that we can do this just as a matter of course as part of our business. That it's not taking us months and months and months, but actually it's part of the program planning. So your points there to how we then do this going forwards. It should be seamless, shouldn't it? Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone for that contribution. Thanks Sam for the presentation. We're being asked to note the report. We're now at the point in the agenda where we're going to take a short 10-minute break. We are running slightly over our scheduled time, so if I could ask everybody to return at 11:20, and during the break if you would turn off your cameras and mute your microphones please, and I'll see everyone in 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back everyone. Let's crack on with the agenda. We're now moving to section 5 of the agenda. First topic there is the major programs report. I'll ask Ivan to do an overview of the report, and then we'll go through each of the relevant updates with the lead for each of those programs. So Ivan, if you could kick us off please.
Cool, thank you very much, David. It's been a busy 3 months, so I'll just and we've just had our annual report. So I'll just sort of pause for a second, maybe step back and reflect on context here. So first, this is a report on major programs for assurance at the Programmes Delivery Committee. Major programs means the largest of our programs. We've got a scoring mechanism which we use to judge what is a major program, and we run that regularly as new programs come up. You can see some of that in the report here. Audit Plus has been assessed as a major program, and then some of the other programs have not quite made that threshold, and that's an important part about the our commitment to transparency, but not overloading the work of this committee and everybody else. So major programs is an important distinction for us. It's also a phrase used by government. The governance landscape for programs has become quite busy through 2025, partly because we're in escalation, but also because of the new DDET governance arrangements the government have put in place that meet generally on a monthly cycle, and also because some of our programs, the three that are escalated for assurance here at the end of the report, LIMS and RISP and WICIS, have benefited from close attention from chief executives, digital directors. Finance directors have had some involvement as well, and on top of that, the DDET Delivery Board and the DDET Leadership Board. So, these are extremely challenging, complex, multi-partner programs, and they're getting a lot of, they're getting a lot of governance attention, shall we say, across the system, and most of that is working on a monthly and now for LIMS a weekly cadence. So I think it's an important distinction there that we are here for assurance. Firstly, for you, as for the independent members, for us as a board in our own, but also public assurance, because none of those other arrangements are in public. A lot of these matters are sometimes have commercial implications and a bunch of other things. So we trying to work as publicly as we can and share as much as we can openly and transparently. And I just wanted to present that context because it is a whole system challenge to get these programs across the line and to hold them to timetable because of the way that activity is distributed across multiple organizations. And I wanted to reassure the committee that there is a lot of system attention on these at a really important period. The next 3 to 6 months is very busy for these programs, and some of them hopefully moving into their, well, hopefully, and we're determined to move them into their closure phase over the next 3 to 6 months. So I'll come back to the general update, and then we'll hand over, as we usually do, back to you, and then we'll go through individual leads to talk, and we'll take questions on each of them that are in the report, and there are links in the papers that have been published, and so on, if anybody watching wants to dive in more deeply. So some key things through the last quarter, we're now fully operational on our sort of automated digital tooling for managing projects, the Manage My Project system. That's what's generated these reports. That's giving us a consistency and a visibility, and supports our own internal management, but also support through our monthly portfolio management board, but also enables us to serve all of that external governance. So we can use that tooling now to generate the different formats and styles of reports that are needed by all those different groups, which I think it would have been very, very difficult, well, onerous to do if we hadn't invested in 2025 in building this tool and migrating our teams to it. At the portfolio level, we're at a stable RAG position. That's not necessarily a good thing because we do have a few red and red amber programs in there. We want a route to green for each one of those in the detailed reports. The program leads for those programs have sort of charted or described a route to green for themselves. So stability is welcome. It's not getting worse, but we are all determined to try to move things up, and we need to get things to amber green and to green as we go through. So we have one program which is red at the moment. That's the LIMS program. There is good news in the LIMS program. It's a very complex, multifaceted program. Michelle will give a bit of an update. There are some really good things, some significant achievements that have over the last few weeks, actually, since the beginning of the calendar year. But there are still really significant challenges over the next 3 months or so. And then we have programs that are in an amber red status. RISP, the radiology procurement, the PACS replacement program, Connecting Care, which Sam Hall will update on later on, and the DSPP program, which is amber red because it is going at full tilt. As you might imagine, there's the minister has been closely involved with the new features and capability that have been enabled in the app over the last 3 months. We'll say a little bit more about that when we get to the detailed report. We're currently in a position where we have funding confirmed to the end of March, but not beyond that. We are managing external sources and contractors. We're managing all the different components of a system or an application that is used by over 600,000 people. And so the programme has assessed its delivery confidence as amber red to reflect that degree of uncertainty, which makes it a bit difficult to move forward. I should say, we've got a high level of confidence that we will secure that funding, but from a technical perspective, it's not yet formally confirmed by letter. It will be when we receive our remit letter, which we're expecting imminently, and we discussed that on Monday earlier this week at the SHA board. So it's a sort of a simultaneous. I am feeling confident that the app is not going to suddenly run out of money and have to be turned off. That isn't going to happen. But from a governance and risk perspective, the programme board felt that it was important to recognise that. The TSBP programme was externally chaired by Hugh Thomas, the finance director from Hywel Dda. So clearly, the finance and the runway that we have there is a key consideration. In the report, and these are to note, there are 3 programme closure reports. One is the CANISC programme, one is the PAS disaggregation programme that Sam gave an update on earlier on, and the third is the POWIS cross-border project. Another example of a project where we've worked very, very closely with a health board to try to manage the data transfers between POWIS and its neighbouring NHS England trusts and integrated care systems. So three programme closure reports there to note, each on a slide. If there are any questions, I'll try to pick those up, but they're there to note. There are no alert for action escalations. There are 3 assure escalations. One is for LIMS, one is for RISP, and one is for the Welsh Intensive Care System. I'm going to hand over to my esteemed colleague, Michelle, who'll be giving the update on those 3. We're also going to be discussing them in the private Programme Delivery Committee, which comes on afterwards. We're in a really intense position on those programmes with some commercial and stakeholder matters to navigate. But to come back to what I said at the beginning, all 3 of those are getting a high degree of system attention, in some cases all the way up to the Cabinet Secretary and the Chief Executive and Director General for NHS Wales. So I think we should take some confidence that we are part of a wider assurance on that, as we often are in these collaborative programmes. So that's all I wanted to say in terms of general introduction. If anyone's got any questions or comments, I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, I'll hand back to you, David.
I think we're all good. Thank you for that overview, Evan. Helpful as usual. Michelle, can we start with you then, please? And we've got 3 things for you to cover, please, starting with WCIS.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm Michelle Sell, I'm the Director of Programmes and Engagement at DHCW and lead on a number of the programmes. As David said there, I'm going to provide updates on 3. So the reports are on the pack. So what I've tried to do is just call out the key points and obviously happy then to take questions from colleagues. So I'm going to start with WCIS. So this is the programme that was established to implement a new computer system into our intensive care units across Wales. So this is a key investment area. So as you can see from the report, this project has effectively been on hold for a period of time while we've been going through a review process. So I have a very recent update, which isn't in the report because it happened just at the end of last week, that we have received a letter from Welsh Government confirming that the ministers are keen for us to move forward now with the WCIS programme. So this is really positive news, I think, particularly for the clinicians who have continued to support the programme and are really keen to be able to deploy a solution into their unit. So really pleased that has now come forward. So what will happen now in terms of the programme, the next stage is absolutely key. We need to be really clear about the scope and the particular aspects, the kind of key aspects of the specification that we would be taking forward, and that all of our colleagues from across all of the health boards are on board with those and agree that those are key to move forward. So you may recall I would have updated previously, we've changed the governance on WCIS. We have a really good programme oversight chair who's previously a nurse. I'm not sure you're ever previously a nurse, as I say that, who's a nurse. I'm sure she'll be pleased to say that was previously an exec director in one of our health boards. So Mandy Riane, that's been really helpful. We've got a very strong clinical and technical advisory groups have been stood up. So those groups will be working through that specification, and we've been asked by Welsh Government to work through that process to take the conclusions to a DDAT leadership board on the 19th of March. So that's a really key phase. And in fact, we're meeting, our chief executive is meeting with the chief exec of ASCOM today, who are the suppliers. So really, really happy. Lots of work to be done now, I think, in the next couple of months to get that to a clear position. But what that should then give us is a really strong basis on which to move forward. I'll probably stop there on WICIS, David, but as I say, happy to take questions.
No, thanks for that update. Really good news that we've got the go-ahead from Welsh Government. Any questions from colleagues? No, I think you're good to move on, Michelle. Thanks.
Okay, so I will move on to RISP. So RISP is again a national programme which is looking at a replacement system to support our radiology department. So the part of the solution that we use to schedule activity through the radiology departments and to report, and then the PACS aspect, which is where we capture all of the scans, if you like, that are taken in the radiology department. It's quite a big system. It's quite a big change that's happening, and it's happening right across Wales. So all of the health boards and trusts have selected the same solution. Philips are the supplier, and we are midway through the implementation. So probably key points to update. The National Imaging Academy and Hywel Dda have both now gone live with the RISP solution. So they are now using the new solution. So we are some way through actually the deployment process. The next health board who are due to go live will now be Cwmtaf Morgannwg. So they're going in March, which leaves us then with a number of health boards who will, will likely now to go live in Q1 of the next financial year. So a couple of things probably from a DHCW perspective, because these are locally managed contracts. There's a lot of kind of local ownership in terms of things like dates of go live. We've discussed previously and with chief executives about DHCW providing more support, particularly from a contractual perspective. So I've got a meeting next Monday now with kind of senior leads from the health boards, just to do a bit of a stock check really on where we are on all of those contracts across Wales, to make sure that we are managing them most effectively. We have regular meetings with Philips. So we meet with the managing director in Philips on a regular basis. So we've got good strategic oversight, I think, from their organisation, and we are providing some additional contract management support, particularly, obviously, we've got a national programme who are doing an excellent job, I think, in terms of providing that oversight and cohesion. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks for that summary, Michelle. I can't see any questions, so you prompt and precise as usual. Thank you for that. If you could cover LIMS for us then, please.
Going well so far. So
Yes.
Thank you, David. Let me talk about LIMS then. So LIMS, again, national programme. This is a new solution that's being deployed into our laboratories across Wales. So again, really core foundational service across all of the delivery of care in the health system. So really brief reminder, and I will say this, I know we would have discussed this in detail, certainly in this committee, just a reminder that this is our mitigation plan, in that plan A, if you like, we awarded a contract and we actually were unable to proceed with that contract. So we've invoked our mitigation, which means this programme is operating to very tight timescales, which is why I make that point. Again, so this is a nationally run programme. It's a single solution that's being deployed across all of the health boards and trusts, and we have a central programme team who are leading that, working really closely. So really strong stakeholder engagement across the whole of the system on this one. So I have some good news again, a very current update in the last week and a half. The solution is now live with tranche 2. So I'll just briefly describe what I mean by that. The laboratories, I think, run as a number of different disciplines or functions under a single service, and we are now deploying the new system on a functional basis. So tranche 1, in terms of our definitions, was what we called a technical go live. So the solution is available, the interfaces are working, the hardware is working, the system is stable. Tranche 2 was our first move into functional areas, so cellular pathology and andrology, and we are now live in that tranche across all of the health boards and trusts across Wales. So we are using the system in anger, if you like, and what we are proving there is we have stakeholders, users on the system. The system is stable and is performing as we would have expected it to. So I think this is really good news now, as we can now roll forward into the other tranches. So the next tranche 3, is microbiology and cervical screening. So that is on track for Q1 next year. The two key areas that follow then, so you've got blood sciences. The blood sciences, I think my colleagues would agree, is the most significant in size in terms of scale and complexity for the laboratory services. So that one is proving more challenging. I think it would be fair to say in terms of the functionality. We know that we are delayed. We are delayed, in fact, across all of the tranches, and we are continuing to work really closely with stakeholders in terms of how do we land this safely and with the functionality and the fixes that we need for day one. So we have, I think, developments probably since we last discussed this. We have got clear dates from the supplier in terms of resolution for all of the outstanding defects and for the outstanding functionality. So we are making changes into the functionality for LIMS, and that has created some of the challenge, but we've got clear dates for those. We've got really good engagement from across all of our health boards. The challenge for us as a system is then the testing of those. We've also agreed with chief executives that we will bring in some external testing resource to help, because this creates a real challenge for our health boards in terms of releasing people to do the testing. So we've got that clarity, and the final point of that that plan, if you like, is the detailed conversation with our health board. So when they are confident and ready to transition from the old system to the new. So that is the stage that we're at the moment, really just landing that and locking that in with all of our health board and trust colleagues. Ivan mentioned this is a critical programme of work. It is behind where it should be. We have escalated right to chief exec level, and we now have a weekly escalation touchpoint call with chief execs, directors of finance and directors of digital. So we've got a lot of focus and support from the health boards and trusts because we really need to work together to land this now. Yeah. The aspect, sorry, David, I'll just say really quickly that I didn't raise there, the blood transfusion. So I'm sure everyone would appreciate, again, this is a key aspect of the functionality and of the safety in the solution we take very seriously. The management of bloods across the system. That will be the final aspect that will go live in the system. And that, again, we have some challenges in that area that we are currently working through with health boards, how we manage those most effectively collectively. And that will then be the last part of the solution to go live. So we do anticipate this programme will now run into the next financial year. We have escalated that, as I said, to Welsh Government and to chief executives. We are working with the programme board now to lock in those dates, a programme board meeting next week. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Any questions from Michelle on LIMS? Rowan.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think just worth noting that we are all aware that this is far from an ideal scenario in terms of workload across the whole of the NHS in Wales. You wouldn't really be seeking to do, changing out of risk and LIMS and some of the other programs that we have running simultaneously. It's a lot of work for the system. My concern really is these systems are fundamental to delivery of care. You need them to support care in the NHS. What is the consequence of these running over into another quarter beyond the current financial year? And is there any risk there in terms of securing budget to make that happen? What could be the consequence of that situation?
Yes, and really well put, Rowan, in terms of those key challenges. Two aspects. I think, in terms of the implications. So one, as you've pointed out, is the cost. So there are costs associated with maintaining a programme and with the level of support and work that we need to take this forward. Those costs have been identified and those costs have been shared with Welsh Government and with the health boards, and we are now working through how those costs will be firstly mitigated and then secondly how they will be covered. So those costs, will be borne by the system, likely by the health board. So that is a challenge. That is challenge number one, I think, and we are very conscious of that. And then the other challenge, as you say, is these are absolutely critical services to the delivery of care in the NHS. So we also need to be clear that the current systems, we would refer to as the legacy systems, are safe and robust and will continue to operate until we can transition onto the new systems. So that is certainly something. So in this case, the core system, if you like, we already operate on one LIMS system. We support that system. Sam has an excellent team who look after that system. So we are not concerned about the stability in that system in the short term. We cannot sustain that system in the long term, which is why we're running this replacement programme. So we're working closely with colleagues who are supporting that system and with the supplier. It's the same supplier in this scenario, which also helps us. I think that they will continue to support the legacy system. The exception to that is in the blood transfusion space. So there are other legacy systems that are running within the individual organisations, so they will have been looking and planning to ensure that they've got continuity in those systems as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michelle. You've prompted my last question. My question was going to be around the continuity of the legacy system while we make this switch. So thanks for that assurance. I can't see any other questions. So Michelle, thanks as always for those updates. Let's move to Sam Lloyd for an update on the Microsoft 365 Enterprise Agreement.
Thank you, David. And just to say that we're in a phase of negotiation on this at the moment. So obviously there are some commercial sensitivities, and we're going to talk about this in more detail in the private session this afternoon. So we'll be able to obviously get into that more then. But just to give a bit of an overview of where we are. So the Microsoft 365 Enterprise Agreement is the contract that gives NHS Wales access to the 365 toolset, which is really the suite of collaborative tools that we all use every day to do our jobs. It really underpins the ability of NHS Wales to communicate and collaborate together effectively. So that's things like Teams, Office, email, SharePoint, OneDrive, all of those core collaboration tools. And it also includes a suite of security and compliance features as well. So things like the desktop antivirus and our email security filters and so on. So a really core underpinning capability that we all need. In order to deliver best value for money, we do have a single enterprise agreement currently, which is an all Wales contract. So every organisation in NHS Wales is part of that. We have a single central tenancy, which contains all of our user accounts and really does facilitate that seamless collaboration between organisations. We're currently in the 4th year of a 5-year enterprise agreement. Year 4 ends on the 30th of June of this year. So we do have two options. There is an option to extend into year 5 of the current agreement, or we can negotiate a new enterprise agreement, which would start from June of this year. And really, the aim of what we're trying to achieve is to secure the best pricing up front. So we need to limit the shock, as it were, of going from the current arrangement to the new one, whether that be year 5 or whether that be year 1 of a new agreement. We need to ensure that we've got access to innovation capabilities, so AI tooling and so on, which is coming to the fore now increasingly, and then obviously to ensure long-term price stability as best we can. There's a lot of digital inflationary pressures across the whole of the industry at the moment, and Microsoft are no exception to that. They're investing very heavily in AI. We're seeing figures of £100 billion a year being spent, and obviously they will want that money back. So prices are increasing, so we need to do as much as we can to protect ourselves from that. So our current preferred approach is to negotiate a new enterprise agreement, which will start from June of this year. This has been very much a collaborative team effort. So there is a group that we've pulled together. So we've got domain experts from our Centre of Excellence, from finance, from procurement, and so on across. And this is across a range of organisations in Wales. We've established a project board, which is overseeing the process, and that has digital and clinical representation on that board. It's supported by a task force which has representation from all health boards, trusts and special health authorities across the system. And that is tasked with pulling together the requirements from all organisations and validating the individual numbers of licensing and so on that we need to procure. We're providing regular updates to directors of finance, to deputy directors of finance and to directors of digital. I also updated the chief executive management team this week on progress as well. Once the project board has an overarching deal in place, assuming we get to that point, we'll be providing breakdowns of costs to all organisations. Those costs are recharged out, so it's not a central cost that we pick up in DHCW. And then all local organisations or all NHS Wales organisations will need to approve their spend through their boards. And there's quite a tight schedule of board approvals which is required in order to get to a point where we can hopefully take it to the DHCW board for sign off, and we're aiming for that in May. So the timeline that we've set out is asking organisations to approve in their boards during March, and for DHCW to approve in our board in May, and then for the contract to be signed ready for commencement on the 1st of July. So that's where we're aiming for. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sam. Any questions for Sam on the update to the Microsoft 365 Enterprise Agreement? No, can't see it. That was really clear, Sam. Thanks for that, and good luck with the negotiations. So let's move on to Evan, who's going to give us an update on EPS and EPMA.
Thank you very much, David. So these are the two digital medicines programs that we manage. They're quite different in flavour, so I'll use our typology and I'll do EPS first and then EPMA. EPS is what we would call now a DHCW delivery program, in that we are directly responsible for the work that we are doing. What EPS is doing is digitally enabling prescriptions, mainly in primary care, although we're starting to extend now into secondary care, or that's our next step. But that means enabling GPs and community pharmacists particularly. It is, although it's a direct delivery program in that we manage, it's still a complex program with many partners. There's 7 different community pharmacy software suppliers, GP supplier, 375 or so GP practices to migrate onto the system. Key elements of the UK architecture provided by NHS England for us to integrate to, and surfacing functionality into the NHS Wales app as well, so that users can access their prescription data. It's making really good progress, and it's working very, very closely with Sam Hall and the primary care team and the GP migration system, to such a degree that as part of our mitigation and response to INPS leaving the market, we've temporarily slowed the EPS program to move more resource and capacity into the GP migration. The net result of which, though, is then it enables us to speed up again much more than we would otherwise be able to do on the EPS migration. So we're currently on track to complete EPS rollout across primary care by November 2026, November of this year, which is almost a year ahead of what the original program schedule was when the program was first established several years ago. And I think that is that's just something that is very welcome to see. We're currently at 40% of GP practices, 80% of community pharmacies, 100% of dispensing appliance contractors, although that sounds better than saying there are 4. There are 4 of them, but we're at 100%. So we're making good progress. There's a really clear plan and a timetable for how we're working through that. And the volumes are really ramping up now over the last 3 to 4 months, over 5 million prescription items through this process. At the moment, we're at about 25% of all prescriptions are flowing digitally through this system. And we roll out in a sort of a phased regional footprint, because we need to enable the GPs and the local community pharmacies at around the same time. You can't have half of that pathway. There are a couple of things that are on the roadmap for the team are working on at the moment. One is non-nominated pharmacy prescriptions. So currently you need to nominate a pharmacy and the digital prescription is sent to the pharmacy that you've nominated. This new functionality there'll be a barcode available in the app, so you can go to any pharmacy effectively without necessarily having to nominate in advance. And the second one is looking to integrate to hospital outpatient prescriptions, so that you can receive a digital prescription from an outpatient unit, and then go to a community pharmacy to collect. And I think that's a really important step forward. So there's a lot of work in there. It's amber green rather than green, so that sounds wonderful. It's amber green rather than green because we have not quite confirmed the funding arrangements for the ongoing service. When we've completed rollout in November, after that we're going to have to pay on an ongoing basis to maintain that service. We have agreed a formula for how that should be managed with health boards, but we've not locked that in through correspondence and through letters. So technically, again, this is another example of where we don't have funding through 26-27. So I'll pause there and see whether anybody's got any questions or comments.
No, can't see anything.
Okay.
Just one from me. Even the barcode you mentioned, I think that's probably through the NHS Wales app. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
okay.
And there's it's always dangerous to promise things, so I'll try not to. But there will be a suite of prescription features in the NHS Wales app, but clearly they're not available ubiquitously across Wales until we've completed EPS. So we've got a dependency and a connection between all these different programs. But there are some quite exciting things there to be able to see the status of the prescription and other things. And we're working closely with England because there's some digital infrastructure that spans the border for looking for a community pharmacy and so on. EPMA is quite a different program in flavour. EPMA is what we call a support program. Every health board in Wales is implementing. EPA is e-prescribing and medicines administration in hospitals. How medicines are tracked and managed in hospitals. The national program put in place a framework procurement contract. Each health board and some of the trusts, Belinda particularly, have procured from that framework. They manage their own implementations locally. They're funded directly by Welsh Government and accountable to Welsh Government for those activities. But we support them centrally with lessons learned, community of knowledge, advice on standards and some technical aspects. And we also provide the Shared Medicines Repository, which is a central data store which all EPMAs are intended to connect to. The health boards are making progress. All of them have confirmed their framework supplier. They're working with their suppliers. I think the highlight of the last few months is Betsy Cadwaladr going live. Betsy Cadwaladr is the first organisation to go live using Better as a partner. There are different EPMA suppliers used across Wales from a multi-vendor framework. So previously Cardiff and Vale have gone live with Nerve Centre. Betsy have gone live with Better. They're making very good progress in terms of an accelerated rollout. All health boards go live in one or two locations, and then they kind of land and expand. So Betsy are rolling out very quickly. The key highlight from our perspective is that the Better implementation in Betsy Cadwaladr sends data to the Shared Medicines Repository. So it's the first EPMA to connect to the SMR. And so that is a really exciting one. And there's a busy timetable through this year of health boards coming live in sequence, but they manage their own timetables, and so we support all of that activity. The final thing I think I would say is that in the medicine space, we've really benefited from good independent external chairs on these two programs, and particularly also from the attention of Andrew Evans, the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer in Welsh Government, who's acted as a sponsor for these programs, and that's helped us to ensure coordination and communication with stakeholders. During the last quarter, we've done some work on the future roadmap for medicines. We gave an update to digital directors. The programs gave an update to digital directors. Kath O'Brien, our Chief Pharmacy Information Officer in DHCW, was leading on that. And some of that is ambitious and some of it is bracing. So completion of EPS and EPMA gets us to normal, I suppose, right? It gets us to the benchmark for where most healthcare systems would be. We're now turning our attention to, well, what comes next? Because digital medicines is a much, much wider strategic landscape than that. So we've shared that with digital directors Andrew is very closely involved in that work, working with Kath as well. So when hopefully these programs, EPMA and EPS, will complete within the next 12 months to schedule, and then we look at what comes next, because there are other areas of digital medicines management that we're targeting, but we're doing that with stakeholders, with partners, and with Welsh Government.
Right, thank you. Ivan, a question from Marion.
Diolch, Chair, and thank you for that update, Ivan. Hwnna'n glir iawn. In terms of the EPMA, and good to hear about the successful rollout at Betsy, alluding to our previous discussion earlier this morning about consistency across the piece, can I check whether there are any negative implications in terms of health boards choosing different partners, as you referenced Cardiff and Betsy, for instance, in this space? Diolch.
Yeah, potentially, yes. The Minister in May of last year set out a Once for Wales framework with 3 tiers, the top tier of which is everybody uses one system. Welsh Nursing Care Record would be an example. The second tier is everybody uses the same system but independently. Maternity would probably be in that bracket. And the third tier would be everybody uses different systems, but they all share data in a consistent format in terms of data interoperability. And that's where we are on medicines. So the expectation from government, strongly reinforced through a Welsh Health Circular and others, is that all EPMA systems should transact their data to the Shared Medicines Repository through a common HL7 FHIR interface. And that's what gives us the consistency, the transparency, and takes away the potential challenges of data migration and data readiness, because that data all transacts in a consistent format. I think tier 1 is clearly better than tier 3 when it comes to organizational change, because in the front end systems that they use, the workflows will be configured differently. The working practices will be different. There will be user familiarity, which is different in different systems. And at that user front end, so obviously I'm responsible for data much more than I am for the front end applications. But in some senses, we're making a step back. I can see Ryan's got his hand up. I'm going to probably steal his thunder here, because several years ago, there was a great deal of effort in Wales to consolidate onto a single all Wales drug chart, a paper single all Wales drug chart. As everybody moves digitally, we will not have a single all Wales digital drug chart. There will be different drug charts because each system presents that information in a different way. And so in some senses, we're stepping away from that Once for Wales position to a more fragmented one. Sorry, I hope I didn't steal your contribution there, is it?
You didn't steal my contribution, but I'm glad you've remembered it, because I've made the point many times. I was going to ask you, could you explain to me the governance for non-compliance to the standards that have been issued? If a particular supplier or health board don't comply to the standard that is part of the overall objective, what leverage is there in the system to resolve that, please?
Yeah, good question. I would say there are 2 aspects to the governance. So one is a technical enforcement of standards, and that sits with us. So we're responsible for the Shared Medicines Repository. We are responsible for the FHIR APIs, and therefore we can embed compliance into that technical layer. That is, you can only connect to the API if you do that in the standard that is required. So if the governance says that it must be a FHIR standard and it must contain this data set because that's the data standard, then if you try to connect to the API and don't conform, then the API won't work. And therefore, you've got a good black and white sort of test of governance in that sense. In terms of organizational governance, that sits with Welsh Government, not with us. Health boards have each submitted local business cases to the government. Government funded against those local business cases. There are terms and conditions in those letters, although not ones that we are always cited on in DHCW. And when health boards want to, if they can't conform or comply with the directions that they receive from Welsh Government, then they raise that with Welsh Government as a change request. Welsh Government assesses that and makes its decision. We're not part of that process, so we're not in DHCW. We're not an agency on behalf of government in terms of the enforcement of that requirement. And neither does the EPMA National Programme Board sit above the local EPMA boards. That's why we've come up with this typology of a support programme to help people to understand the governance relationships here. So the local programmes are not accountable to the national programme. They do share information, but on a learning basis rather than on an approval and authority basis. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to come back, please, Chair, if I can.
Yeah.
So in a scenario where there was non-compliance and there was an application through the governance to allow that non-compliance to proceed, and that the implications of that resulted in work for DHCW, additional work for DHCW, non-funded work for DHCW, do we have a mechanism to recoup that, or at least invoice for it? Because there's an impact on our organisation.
Well, we have a mechanism, and I suggest it's called negotiation. So there's no automatic mechanism to recover those types of costs. We've got a process. The new service request process would be our primary channel for that, where health boards can ask us to provide functionality for them. We prioritise in the open. Sam Lloyd's team manage most of that work. We prioritise in the open with health boards about what we can handle within our own capacity. There is no there's no structured automatic tariff type arrangement. It would be subject to discussions each time.
Okay, so I presume that's on a risk register somewhere for us, is it?
Risk register of which risk? That health boards need work for us that we're not resourced to do.
Yes, and it may come at short notice.
Yes, I would say. Good questions, Richard. Good questions. So I think that is, we don't currently recognise that as a risk because it's a characteristic of the system. We inhabit, or we occupy a really important space in the architecture in the digital architecture across Wales. We manage all the integration, all the national integration infrastructure. Health boards continually require new connections to that integration. That's entirely natural. Whenever they implement any program, whether that's any new product, whether that's medicines or otherwise, they very often need to come to us to ask for connections through the integration hub, through the Fiorano fabric that we've had, that we operate at the moment. And we manage that on a sort of a continual basis with the health boards. So it's not a risk in that there's not a lot of uncertainty around it. It's not a will it happen, won't it happen? It does, and it has, and it will continue to happen. That health board need connections from us, and then we manage that with them best we can in terms of our capacity to deliver from our own resources or other conversations with them about how best to do that. And I think recently we've been working really hard as part of our stakeholder engagement to respond with pace to those types of requests, especially when they're aligned to ministerial priorities and maternity and the ADT playback that we did in 6 weeks from the beginning of October to the middle of November. I think it would be an example of where we've been really very, very responsive, very urgently to things that are needed by by health boards when those also align to a ministerial priority, even when that dislodges other work in our plans.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. Rowan.
I just want to make a follow-up comment on that exchange between Rydian and Ivan, because there is a lack of clarity, in my view, as to whether the need to be responsive when work is asked for, slightly lastminute.com, in terms of delivering functionality that is really important for care, is a business as usual piece of DHCW's operation, or whether it is recognised that in one of the other ministerial priorities is architecture and standards, that acting responsively isn't necessarily captured in terms of both reputational risk for DHCW and financial risk. So I'm thinking, you mentioned Fiorano, Ivan. I can remember chairing a digital governance and safety subcommittee not so long ago, where because of the additional connections that we had increasingly had to put in place, there was quite a significant uplift in our renewal contract for Fiorano. I can also think of a scenario if we didn't act in the way that you've described, that perhaps the perception would be that DHCW, were not delivering, and it's a source of friction. But I do think it's a risk, because the long-term objective of the organisation to deliver and enable, digital systems across the healthcare consistent with national standards, there is the opportunity for the sort of a reach round action to deliver a short-term requirement, and I just think there's a lack of balance in the system that recognises that.
Shall I suggest Sam comes in?
Yeah, that's what I was
on this, and then I can come back and wrap up.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Rowan, what you've articulated there is very much a live issue, and I think it's really important for us that where we have activity that's ongoing through major programs, that any change to program scope is managed through the program, because there are lots of routes into DHCW, and it can be that new service requests will come in, or something will come via some other channel, and we end up committing to work, which then we become a dependency for a piece of program go live activity in a health board, and we've managed to insert ourselves in the process through having the best intentions, but it doesn't help anybody if we then become the bottleneck in the process. So these governance routes are there for a reason, and we need to make sure that we stick to them, and that's a message we're adhering to internally, but also needs to be heard externally as well, I think.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Even if you could quickly wrap this one up,
Yep,
we're running over a little bit.
We'll go back and have a look at this as a team to see whether there's a risk that we can explain. The way that we're handling this, it's difficult, because when health boards ask us for a connection, they ask for a bespoke connection, or their suppliers ask us for a bespoke connection, and that tends to be quite a complicated thing to deliver, with a lot of mapping from our existing data standards on to whatever the supplier's preferences might be. We are trying to move away from that. So the future is standard FHIR common APIs, and so if a health board wants a connection, they can have a connection as long as it's the vanilla connection, and that becomes easier for us to serve. At the moment, the cost of that connection, that is the traffic that goes through those types of APIs and so on, is paid for by the NDR program. Health boards effectively have we've got a whole load of tokens or vouchers that they can consume, whether for analytics purposes or for others. At some point in the future, we're going to need to move towards a clear, transparent cost recovery basis for those types of uses, which might be from health boards, might be government funding us centrally through our core. It could be a whole different ways. We're several years off from that, I think, because at the moment we've got the headroom. The activity is easily affordable within the overall NDR envelope. So that takes 2 points of friction away, as long as the system follows through with the principles that everybody signs up to, which is moving to standards-based common APIs and away from bespoke, configured, unique connections between different systems.
Okay, thank you for that summary, Evan. Let's move on. In the interest of time, I'll ask presenters now to be a bit brief, because we're running over a little bit. But Sam, if you could cover the integration hub for us, please.
Thank you, David. So integration is the process by which our systems are able to talk to one another. So there's over 100 systems within DHCW, and as we know from the National Target Architecture work, there are 1,400 systems across NHS Wales. Many of those systems need to exchange data with one another in order to keep a complete and accurate record of patient information or interactions, or to refer to demographics information or whatever it might be. So the integration platform that we operate within DHCW is central to a lot of the activity that goes on across the wider NHS, and we've just touched on some of these issues in the conversation we've just had. But a lot of work comes through that system. Health boards are often adding new systems which need to be integrated into the national architecture. Changes that are being made within DHCW require new flows to be established, and so on. Currently, we have about 300 independent information flows flowing through our integration platform. That's currently a proprietary software as a service type platform. We're looking to modernize that, to move it into a cloud native architecture, to rationalize the flows so that we can move from 300, ideally down to half. That would be the kind of target that we're aiming for. And doing that will enable us to manage the platform in a much more efficient manner, I think, because we will be able to standardize the flows that come through there, meaning that we'll be able to onboard new systems much more quickly, reduce the overall workload that lands with the integration team, be more responsive to requests as they come in from health board colleagues. So we're in the process of building a new environment, which is sitting in cloud. It's going to be a cloud native platform that we're building, that we will own the intellectual property for. We're working with a partner on this development at the moment. We're currently in a private beta phase, so we've got some test flows running through the new integration hub, as we're calling it, and we're due to have the first fully live flow with production data going live on the 10th of February. So progress is well underway. This is very similar to the cloud program that I was talking about earlier, in the sense that there's quite a big business change element to this. So we're asking the teams who manage the current integration platforms to work in very different ways. So a big part of the program is to work with the external partner to hand that knowledge across to the internal teams. So that's probably the biggest challenge that we've got here, again, is bringing those people on the journey with us and helping them to make that transition in a way that's fair to them and helps them to do so. So we are planning to transition to largely an internal service from the third party at the beginning of the new financial year. So that's the next kind of major milestone that we're working to. There's some risk around recruitment of key roles into our internal team to enable that, but that's the target that we're working to at the moment.
Okay, great. Good progress. Thank you for that, Sam. Any questions for Sam on the integration hub? Nope, great. Okay, thank you for that, Sam. Let's move on then to Ivan for the National Target Architecture and NDR.
Thank you very much, David. I'll keep National Target Architecture short because there was an update to the SHA board a few days ago on Monday. So if there are viewers who want to look more closely at NTA, then they can, I'm cross-selling here, they can look at that recording, and of course board members will be familiar. So it's on track to complete its final milestone for 25-26, which is the delivery of a draft strategic investment plan by the end of March. The consultants and the team are working at pace on that, but that's all on track. Last project board met last week, so I haven't got anything to escalate or to draw out, particularly in terms of attention. If anybody has any questions or comments, welcome those.
No, I think we had a good update on Monday, so I'd commend anybody who wants more detail on that to dip into our recording of our board meeting. If you could move on to NDR then, please, National Data Resource.
Thank you very much. And again, taking your brief to be brief, I'll try to do that. So I'm sure everybody will be familiar with the National Data Resource Programme. It's a major flagship collaborative programme for a partnership programme in our typology, working closely with health boards. Around a third of the money for NDR is distributed onwards to health boards and to Social Care Wales as partners. What the programme is looking at the moment, and what's happened over the last few months, are probably the things I'm going to call out. So the last 3 months or so have been a really busy period of doing things that were not in the original programme plan, not in the Phase 4 business plan, particularly the routing of hospital appointments and waiting list referrals through to the app. So the CDR, which is the direct care element of the NDR platform, is the sort of the common data staging mechanism in that architecture. Really welcome to see that. 6 health boards went live at the end of October. They're all the ones that used Welsh PAS, and Cardiff and Vale went live at the beginning of January, which means we've got an all Wales coverage and around about 1.2 to 1.3 million appointments a week flowing into the CDR. Not all of those are surfaced into the app. There's configuration. Each health board manages its own configuration. And again, there's a fairly familiar land and expand type of approach. But we are seeing well over 100,000 appointments a week shown to users in the app. So this is really operating at scale and is consistent across the whole of Wales. So that's been a quite exciting development. And the second piece of work was the maternity playback. Health boards, rather late in the day, said that they did need admit, discharge and transfer integrations from DHCW through most of 25-26. We had confirmed with them that they would not require those, but then in October they did. They submitted a new service request. We delivered that by mid-November. Teams did a fantastic job. It was a collaborative effort from Sam Lloyd's area and from the CDR team to pull all of that together and to play that back to health boards. And in fact, I'm really proud, and I can't resist the opportunity to say we played that data back so fast to the health boards that they didn't have the receiving infrastructure in place to receive it when it went live. So we absolutely delivered on that agenda. The consequences are that we've knocked some of the other things that were in our delivery timetable out because we redeployed resources to that urgent requirement aligned to a ministerial priority. So we're working through that to see how much we can recover in Q4. So that's one of the things that the team are really working on. And the second is the management of disbursements. £2.5 million out to health boards and to Social Care Wales. Historically, we find that that moves around a lot in the last quarter. So to try to keep that position as stable as possible, we're working very, very closely with them to try to get all of that squared off sooner than month 11 or 12. The final thing is about our people, stakeholder engagement, operating through the programme board. We held the first ever development day for the NDR programme board in the autumn. We've got another one coming up in a few weeks at the end of February. We use development days very effectively, I think, as SHA board. We started doing that for a programme delivery committee in 2025. That's something that I've rolled through into the NDR programme board, and I think that was really well received by members. The next one will look at wrapping up 25-26, but more importantly, looking at the 26-27 roadmap and aligning that to the government priority, which is the migration and flow of data into the NDR platform, alongside other things that are continuing about the analytics platform, providing some new applications using AI technologies on that. So it's a very exciting period. There's a lot going on the NDR at the moment.
Great, that's good news, and great that you're able to flex to adjust to ministerial priorities. Any questions on NDR programme for Evan? I can't see any, so let's go to Sam for the last 3 updates on the NHS Wales app, Connecting Care and Audit Plus Replacement. Over to you, Sam, with some support from Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I'll just touch on the SPP, but I know obviously that's quite a few times today already. So a lot of the work we've got currently is in the moving from programme into product. So there's a stream of work going on in that. But also in the last period, you'll be aware that we had the waiting list information released. That was a big release just before Christmas. And then the teams worked over Christmas. So the DSPP teams, the in-house app team and Cardiff and Vale worked over the Christmas and New Year period to enable us to get the Cardiff and Vale information out as well. So that's very welcome that is now all complete. There's been an awful lot of work as well in establishing the in-house app team and moving some of the work across. We obviously still have our delivery partner working with us to deliver some of the remaining things, the remaining items that are in train for this year. But and obviously I'm sure Ivan knows a lot more about that, but in the interest of keeping it short, there is one hot off the press development which we confirmed last week, and that is authorised access. This is something that has been quite a hot potato across across the system, frankly, which is to allow people to have proxy access to an account within the same GP practice. So this was delivered quite a while ago now, but it was rolled out as a pilot and it didn't satisfy everything that we needed. That has now been completed and fixed, and it's in testing, and we are aiming to try and get that rolled out as quickly as possible, because it's something that comes into the GP reform. The changes are happening to GP reform, so it's really important that we get that over the line too. And I've just literally had the update that it's all is going well in testing, so I thought it was worth bringing that out today as well.
Yes, thank you for that, Sam. That's really good news. Okay, we've covered DSP quite a bit, so if you could move on to Connecting Care next, please.
Yeah, Lee.
Hi, it's Lee Mullen, Deputy Director for Community and Mental Health. Connecting Care has been established to deliver the migration of health boards and local authorities to a new set of electronic record tools and support the delivery of integrated services across social care, community and mental health. It's established to take forward the local authority aspects of that, with DHCW working with the health boards to deliver the implementation of the community health electronic health records. And some of the joint aspects, such as the integrated care. All of this being successful will then allow us to exit the existing product in this space. So Connecting Care received the majority of its funding in August, receiving 4.1 million of revenue and an additional 4.1 million of capital. Much of this was scheduled to be dispersed to the health boards to execute their plans. The capital was dispersed to support the digital enablement of staff through the provision of updated digital devices. And most of the health boards have now confirmed the procurements are complete on that and are planning the commission and distribution of these devices. So this supports thousands of practitioners with modern devices, allowing them digital access to records at the point of care out in the community. And now we're working with the health boards to collect the detail of that and capture the benefit that was realised. On the revenue side, health boards are now well advanced on the procurement of mental health systems, with Bevan and Swansea Bay both moving into implementation. 3 others are moving through the evaluation and award process, so I won't talk about that particularly. And we are planning with Haldar to support a broader procurement for a community tool, which would potentially lead to a collaboration with several other health boards to purchase that capability. We're also progressing at pace with the production of business case for an integrated care record. Workshops are happening across Wales with the health communities this week and next, and we're working with WLGA to coordinate a similar set of workshops with the local authorities. So all in all, it's been challenging because the funding came in quite late, but we are well progressed given where we are.
Okay, great, excellent summary. Thanks, Lee. Any questions for Lee on Connecting Care? No, you've covered everything there. Thanks, Lee. And if you could finish off then with the Audit Plus replacement, please.
Well, Audit Plus. So the Audit Plus replacement project, this will shortly be renamed once we've confirmed a new name for the service. As it is, it's named after the existing product, so we can't move forwards with that. So we will rename this project when we've agreed what the service will be called. So the Audit Plus product is used to compile GP data for the provision of management reporting back into GPs and for secondary uses such as vaccination cohorting, and in an anonymized form, it's delivered through into the SAIL database for public health management. The Audit Plus tool is due to run out of contract in May 2026. This project will replace the functionality provided by this tool and capability with capability from our own DHCW platforms. There are, however, a number of moving parts, somewhat beyond our control. So the IMPS migration of GP surgeries, the migration of EMIS services to the cloud, and the sunsetting of EMIS of their data extract tool, PDES, in favour of a new extract element is all happening within the realms of the kind of project space. So mapping these dependencies with the supplier Optum has led to some complexity. With this uncertainty, we took the decision to extend the current contract with Informatica for a year, therefore giving us until May 2027 to deliver the migration to the new product. This gives us the contingency to complete the project without any degradation or break in service. Digital work is well progressed. However, we await the resolution of some of the data feeds due to the complexities described above. And that will give us live data coming through, hopefully through mid-February, and that will really allow us into the meatier bit of the project, which is the dual running of the 2 data feeds, the comparison of the reports, and the migration to the new data feeds once we know everything is producing as expected the consistent set of results from the 2 data feeds. This is all backed up by an ongoing information governance work stream. There are some adjustments to how we manage the data through these systems and services, which will require which have required new data protection impact assessments and will require a new agreement with the GP services. But we'll continue to be a data processor on behalf of the GP service as we are now. So we'll work through that and hopefully keep that relatively simple in terms of agreements. So that's where we are on the Audit Plus replacement.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Pragmatic decision to extend the Audit Plus contract and give ourselves a little bit of contingency around all of those different moving parts you're trying to orchestrate there. Anybody got any questions for Lee on Audit Plus replacement? No, that was a really great summary. Thank you for that, Lee. So that concludes all of the programme updates in this section of our agenda, and we're being asked to note these updates for assurance. And with that, I'll move on to 5.2, which is the corporate risk register update, and I'll hand over to Chris Darling for that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's 17 corporate risks on the risk register at the moment. 7 of those are assigned to this committee. That's more risks than assigned to any other committee of the board. But having said that, as you know, Chair, we put the risk register after the programme updates, because often as we go through, by the nature of the updates, we cover a lot of the risks and escalations that way. So I'm going to run through the risks assigned to the committee, a number of which we have covered. The first one, though, is a new risk around, and Ivan updated at board on this, new requirements and the impact on resources and the plan. And we've heard a few times throughout the committee today ministerial and other priorities impacting programme plans and moving programme delivery as a result of that. I mention that just because we'll be reviewing the IMTP over the next couple of months as a board, signing that off. So I think it's just worth us considering that in the context of, have we got the pitch right for the IMTP next year? A really difficult thing to do. But in terms of being able to juggle what will inevitably continue to be additional requirements over the next couple of years. So that is a new risk. Ivan described that at board. It is, as you've heard, a live risk and one that's we're working hard to mitigate. There is then the more programmatic specific risks. So the delay in the implementation to W LIMS. I think Michelle covered that off earlier, but at the end, once I've gone through them, if Michelle, Ivan or Sam want to come in, there's the RADIS team scaling back. So that links to the RISP programme. The intensive care implementation delays, and then there's the National Target Architecture Transition Roadmap and the transition to the new data architecture. So I don't want to skirt over these, David, but I do think we've probably covered them via their updates. So I'll just see if Michelle or Ivan want to add anything that hasn't been said. Can't see, no. So, and then just to note, David, on the risk register, the paper does just summarise changes in terms of risks since the last programmes delivery committee. So I'll just ask the committee to note those, and I'll pause and stop there.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I think you're right. We've covered a lot of the risks as we've gone through different programme highlights. So thank you for being brief on that. I'll just check and see if the colleagues have got any questions. I think we're all good on the risk register update. So if you could, staying with you, Chris, if you could move on to escalation status and our improvement plan update, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to update on the improvement plan, where we're at as of the end of January. So we had a plan that was agreed by Welsh Government in May 2025. By the end of January, we were in a position where we were scheduled to have delivered 42 milestones. We've delivered 39 of the 42 milestones at this point. So those 2 milestones, I think it's worth committee members being aware that were scheduled for January. One was to submit the integrated care record OBC in January. That's been pushed back to March. So that's one milestone we haven't achieved. The second one was around the Canis system stepping back to archive mode. That's scheduled to take place in 9 days' time. So that was due to be the end of January. that's still needed at the moment for national cancer audit information. As soon as it's not, that will be stepped back. So I'm confident we'll have that one completed very shortly. Just in terms of delivery of the improvement plan today, I think we've made good progress, but one of the reflections I would have is that we've delivered the majority of milestones. There are 5 that didn't hit their plan date, and that is key because that is what stakeholders remember, not the 90% we've delivered. They're, remember the 10% that missed their target dates. And we've had that discussion and reflection as a senior leadership cohort at the importance of building confidence through consistency. And it has to be quite ruthless in terms of the consistency and delivery, because that is how we get our confidence in this space. So that was just a brief reflection on that. And then in terms of the escalation feedback, as board members know, we had feedback at the beginning of January from Welsh Government, just to pick out a couple of areas. Explicitly positive progress against those milestones mentioned, so that was good to see, but noting that there was more to do around stakeholder perceptions and DHCW stepping into a system leadership space. That feedback has contributed to the drafting. It's a first draft of a phase 2 escalation plan. 2 other things that have contributed to that today. One is the board development session many of you were part of towards the end of December, where we had some reflections and we as a board considered some of the challenges and opportunities going forward with escalation. The second one was a senior leadership day we had a couple of weeks ago, where we reflected on the progress and what's worked well and what hasn't. And just to pick up on the point that we talked about earlier around testing, data migration, etc., really keen that this phase 2 escalation plan is grounded in things that will change how we do things going forward. So I think it needs to be less about delivery against program milestones, more about how the system can change. And that might mean we have to be quite bold about some of the conversations we have as a system with government and others about changing things where we've recognised, and we've got, as you know, a lot of external support to consider, to challenge us and the system on where things could be improved. So there's a programmes delivery committee development session, Chair, coming up in a couple of weeks' time. The draft plan I'll be bringing to that for a discussion and to see if we think it goes far enough in moving the dial around some of that system leadership feedback. So I'll stop there and happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you for that update, Chris. Rowan.
Thank you, Chris. And I just it's a comment really for us to perhaps take away and reflect on. You know, we're in escalation for perceptions around program delivery. Some of the feedback that we received in writing on the 6th of January seems to go beyond the program delivery piece and into kind of a desire to see us having a more of a perception around system leadership, and the word perception is used a lot, and I think, you know, the escalation, you know, isn't in and of itself a bad thing for the organisation. I think you know, the external pressure is, you know, has benefits, but I think it would also be helpful if we could have some senior conversations, you know, that tries to get to the heart of what are the sources of these perceptions, and, you know, what in their mind are the actions consistent with system leadership. Because if you can't frame the barn door, it's quite difficult to hit it. And you know, I find it challenging when we talk about needs to be greater scrutiny, objective assurance in relation to programme delivery, risk and engagement, when as a board, even from the inception of some programmes, and I would suggest RISP and LIMS would be good examples, where the board was very clear in articulating that how risky these programs were. I mean, ultimately there was no choice but to take them on. So I wonder whether there is an understanding that has been the case in many of these programs. So yeah, perception is the truth, because that's how people view our performance. But I do think now that some of the considerations are more general to the whole organisation, and I think we need to have a conversation about that. Otherwise, there's going to be cycles of activity where we're not going to necessarily end up with the right outcome for ourselves and Wales. So I think it's just worth saying that.
Yeah, I share your concern, Rowan, when I read the letter as well. And Chris, I think that's going to be something we could discuss during the development session we've got about how we try and address that, because Rowan's made some really good points there. I think they're valid points, that, but we need to be clear on how we're going to try and address those going forward. If we're to remove our escalation level or manage it downwards. Okay, has anybody else got questions for Chris, or is there anything in summary you wanted to say to wrap up, Chris?
The only thing I'd come back on is I completely agree with Rowan's point. The approach and consideration to the plan as a phase 2 plan is much broader than just programs from my perspective.
Yeah,
it's how we operate in a system effectively. Programs are a part of that, and I know that's what we're escalated for. I also think we have to have some honest discussions with government colleagues before we finalise any plan, so that the recognition on what levers might move the dial from a system leadership perspective are very clear, or understood or not, and then we can potentially do something about them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Marion.
Just finally to add, in fact, what I said at board earlier this week, the audit Wales work on digital transformation across the system, I think is going to be key to informing that discussion going forward. And I think that is due to be completed and shared within the next few weeks, certainly. So I think that's going to be instrumental, and it should help us find an acceptable way forward, perhaps.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Marion. Thanks for raising that. Okay, with that, then let's move on to closing matters. First item is AOB. I've not received anything in advance of the meeting, so I'll just check if colleagues have got anything they wish to raise under AOB. Can't see anything. Okay, in terms of the committee highlight report, I will work with governance colleagues to formulate that report, which will go to the next SHA board. I'll remind everybody that the date of our next meeting is the 30th of April. And with that, I will thank everybody for supporting today's meeting and bring this session to a close, and just remind colleagues that our private session starts in about half an hour's time at 1:10 past 1 o'clock. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.